So I'd like to call this special meeting, this budget meeting of the town council to order for whatever today is, the 13th, January 13th, Wednesday. If you'd rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Eileen is not going to be joining us tonight. I haven't heard specifically from Finley and Bill, so I'm assuming they'll show up soon. Tonight is another budget hearing night. It's kind of a special meeting for us, but I did have, I just wanted to announce our upcoming meetings. We'll be meeting, hi Finley, Thursday, January 14th, tomorrow, a regular town council meeting. Wednesday, January 20th for a budget meeting, and we scheduled January 21st as a budget meeting as well. Those will start at 6:30, and then January 28th, Thursday, we'll have a regular meeting here starting at 7 o'clock. Does anybody have any other announcements or things before we get started? Do you have any announcements, Paul?
No, I do not, sir.
Okay, thanks. So, I was looking at our agenda. Community development is first on the list published by Becky, second on the list published by somebody else, but Becky's is important, so we'll start with community development, which is section something.
21.
21, thanks. I know I looked at it, I just. So Nancy mentioned org charts at the last meeting, and this org chart looks really odd as far as our organization is concerned because it's just mostly a bunch of disconnected boxes. I'm presuming that you, Tim, are the top of the list, and everybody reports up to you eventually, whether
That's
it's
correct.
through somebody else or something else.
Yeah, essentially, the way the office functions is that I oversee operations of the entire department, and then our planning and zoning division, the technical division portion of that is run by the planning and zoning administrator, Robert Price. So he has some supervisory authority over the assistant planner and the two administrative assistants, and I oversee all of that operation.
And the secretaries report to you, I guess.
To me and to Robert, correct.
Oh, and to, so it's confusing enough.
It
Just
is.
what the heck, you know. Paul, do you want to introduce anything with respect to this budget, or?
No, this budget is basically what you'll see all throughout is 53rd week of payroll and retirement cost is the majority of the increases in this budget. There's a couple of small, minor adds and subtracts that Tim will take you through.
Okay.
Thank
Tim.
you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. As Paul mentioned, the majority of the increase, which is about 3% over last year's budget, is due to the 53rd week of payroll, retirement, and other benefit cost increases. That accounts for about $15,073 out of the $16,030 increase in my budget. So otherwise, essentially, I've level funded everything. So we have a total of non-personnel of about $957 difference from last year. The majority of that is due to postage and public meeting notices, as we are now and have been for the last year or so, doing legal notices in both the Merrimack Journal and the Union Leader, following the direction from the council from a couple of years ago. So that has essentially doubled the cost of legal notice for public hearings for the zoning board over the last couple of years. So we've adjusted that upwards and tried to tweak some of the other lines downwards to try to balance that out, and did the best I could. So otherwise, it's as it has been for I think this is the 8th budget I've presented to you since I've came to Merrimack. Other than the years where I have a capital expenditure or 53rd week of payroll, I've tried to keep the budget as level as possible for each of those years since I've been here. Since there's not a ton to talk about in my budget, just wanted to give a couple of quick highlights as I have done in my previous presentations to you. Looking back at 2020, there was 124 agenda items for both the planning board and zoning board, which is a decrease of only 2 from 2019. And our staffing hours at land use meetings decreased from 62 and a half hours to about 52 and a quarter hours. But also, given the fact that we had postponed indefinitely meetings starting in February through June, we actually are seeing an increase in the actual per meeting staff time during this year. On a per meeting basis, we're actually spending more staff time because the meetings have been slightly
Staff
longer
time. Okay.
than they were in the previous years. Major things that we're looking to do this year, first and foremost will be tomorrow night, hopefully the adoption of the zoning ordinance amendments that I presented to you last month. And then the next big step for master plan implementation will be the reformatting and revision of the subdivision regulations, similar to what we did with the site plan regulations last year. I can also report that for the third time since I've been here, I had no staff changes over the course of the year, which was nice.
Wow, that's,
As you
3
know,
out of 8,
I've
that's a
had
little
a
unusual.
lot of churning and turnover in certain positions in the department, just given the nature of particularly the assistant planner position being an entry-level position that sets people up for advancement in other communities. So the only one piece of news I'll give on that is our former assistant planner, Kelly Shamel, now Kelly Walsh, was recently hired as the town planner and code enforcement officer in Epping after a short stint in Milford.
good.
So.
Well, you're training them right.
Interestingly enough, that is now means the last two people that have had the position in Epping were either former employees of mine or interns of mine, because the last town planner over there was an intern of mine from Londonderry.
The work that Epping is doing at Exit 7, at 105 and 125, so she's going to be busy.
Oh, she'll be easy, absolutely.
Absolutely busy.
But certainly entertain any questions anybody has on any specific lines in the budget, but as always, I've tried to keep it as respectful to the council and taxpayers as I possibly can.
Lon?
Tim's gonna think I like to beat up on him, but I don't. Sorry about my absence the last budget meeting. I'm looking for any relief we can get. Line 8510, the GIS. I know it's a capital reserve fund. I know it's savings, but what's your year-on-year expenditure out of that account? Is that,
Do you happen to know that off the top? I know we've spent about 7,000, I think, this year so far.
This year, the big thing is that the flyovers, when we have to do a flyover, and for the last time we had to do a flyover, it was what, a 10 or 15-year flyover?
It was
period?
about 14 years ago before
Right,
last week.
so what we're trying to do is get more accurate data because of, to our GIS with our flyovers. So the $15,000 is basically taking that flyover cost, I think, what was it, around 75, Tim?
We came in significantly under what we budgeted. We had budgeted 150, and I think we got the bid in at about 68.
Yeah, so we're trying to figure every 4 or 5 years for a flyover
Yeah.
to do that. It's a savings account right now, and that's basically what we're trying to do there, is trying to keep the flyovers is the most important piece of GIS.
That provides the base data for all the information in there. And I know that we reduced the capital reserve from 20,000 to 15,000 a couple of years ago because we came in so far under budget on that first contract.
what's the current balance?
Tom, you got that? Hold on, I got that, hold on. $123,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My annual question to Tim on the NRPC, how's the continued relationship with us in the NRPC in terms of the value that they offer to community development with some of the 100-some-odd projects that
Sure.
come through the planning board?
They're not as critical to the planning board side of things from my department's perspective. The biggest benefit we get from Nashua Regional Planning Commission is the various services. I know that pre-COVID, we had started discussions about doing a build-out analysis for the community using their data and models that they have. That's been put on hold until things kind of straighten out with COVID. In addition, the work that they do with the community, particularly on the transportation planning and engineering side with their Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, that in and of itself is the single most valuable portion of the services they provide to the community. Without that, we wouldn't have got the grant funding for the town center trail projects that have gone on and the sidewalk projects that the town council is looking to promote and construct in the next several years. I think the relationship, again, with Jay McCarr and his staff has always been solid. We don't need as many of their services as some of the smaller communities that don't have professional staff, but I've never had any issues with any cooperation or anything within the confines of the budget and the dues that we pay. I still think we get great value out of that relationship.
I just, since I'm the liaison to the NRPC, and having previously sat on the executive board for a couple of years, the executive board has hinted at raising dues at some particular point within the next couple of years. I don't know how much of an increase they would be looking to do for not just Merrimack, but for all the communities, but they have hinted at it. So I would ask that my colleagues keep that on the radar. I don't know if it's gonna be in the next budget cycle for 21, 22, but 22, 23, I think might
And-
be
I know that our
Might be the
dues,
reality,
our
so.
dues were slightly down from last year.
correct.
Again, given our share of the population percentage of the region, so
Correct.
that's typically how they've been assessed, and obviously, I agree that there's likely an increase coming in the future.
And there's a specific formula that they use. If anybody wants to know the formula, I can get it for you. It's based on population versus the number of towns. It's kind of simple arithmetic, but happy to share that if there's any interest. Anyway, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And you pointed out that really the only two increases in your budget are the postage and the advertising.
Yeah.
But we went down significantly when we budgeted last year versus what we spent the year before. Did we just totally miss or
In
Did
terms
this-
of postage or
of advertising?
advertising, yeah, I think it's simply because we've had a larger number of ZBA cases, even though we've had fewer meetings. The cost of doing two separate newspapers, especially since one technically can't be used as official legal notice, but based on the direction we've gotten, we've continued to do the two. So it's offset by revenue by the application fees, because we do charge a $50 notice, legal notice fee to applicants as they present the application to the town. But it was a doubling of the fee a couple of years ago. So, but thus far, we've not had any significant pushback from the development community or residents on that fee.
And last year, we dropped the postage like $1,000, and now we're putting it back.
It's number of abutters for projects really is driving that. So
Okay.
when we have a project,
But again, that's paid for out of fees? or-
again, that's offset by fees, yes.
So we just need to make a good guess as to what the amount is?
Yep.
Because it's offset through revenues, right? Okay. Awesome. If there are no other questions, then we'll thank you very much for
Thank you very
coming out.
much. I'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just a point of order, or if you want to call Deb. When the other speakers come up, if they're comfortable with it, can we ask them to talk with their mask down? I'm having a hard time. Thank you.
if they're comfortable. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's probably just me, but I'm having a
No,
hard time understanding.
not. I'm gonna guess welfare is next on the agenda.
If not, she's making herself next.
She's gonna be regardless, so. Which is fine with me, Pat, but I always have to bring my computer back alive to see what it is, because I didn't print it out. I apologize for that. So, anyway, oh, here it is.
So
So.
welfare, we didn't give you an organizational chart because you're looking at the welfare department right there in front of
The
you.
whole chart, the whole
All one
department
person.
right there, huh?
That's it.
That's,
Well, at least 16, Pat.
is it really?
Pat's budget is pretty much the same as everybody else. There's no retirement in Pat's budget, but the 53rd week of payroll. Social services, we did look at increasing it for about $1,000. And we increased welfare electricity for about $500. Those are really the two big increases in her budget. Pat was be more than happy to I passed out the Nashua Transit. There was a question about Nashua Transit and ridership. I passed that out to the town council earlier tonight to answer the question from last week, and Pat would be more than happy to answer any questions that the council has about her budget.
Would you like me to do welfare first, and then we can go on to those
Yeah,
questions?
please.
Okay. Okay, so the welfare budget, as Paul had said, is a very small increase. I think it's $201 altogether from last year. So, but I moved things around based on what actual costs were and things that I was seeing in previous budgets, and so that's, so there's not a lot of change. I would say, and social services, we did have one agency that came back that had missed the previous year applying, so that was one of the reasons it's increased a little bit. But we had like 3 agencies actually come in with less requests, money requests, so it kind of worked out that it was only an extra 1,000. So the big thing I probably just want to go over with you, so you probably have more questions too, is how welfare has been affected by COVID. And the good thing is that hopefully this budget might not be affected, but we don't know when it comes in July what's happened. But the one thing that's happened in the past, I would say since March, we actually have not seen a huge increase. We've had probably about $3,000 direct costs based on COVID, and they were mostly related to people that were homeless. This has been a terrible year for homelessness in general. It started off really bad about a year ago. Usually I have about maybe 5 cases a year, and I've had 32 cases in that context. And the beginning of COVID, all the shelters were shut down. So we did have to house a couple of people during that time when the state was trying to figure out what to do with people who were homeless and things like that. So some of the costs incurred were more based on that. What's down is the applications of people coming in because of basic disconnects and evictions, because the moratoriums that existed in these areas, it goes really to show that people only come in when they absolutely have to. And so therefore, because these things aren't occurring, I'm not getting the same number of applications as I usually get because of this. So it's kind of like maybe the shift, I'm having more homeless, but we're having less of the other type of emergencies. So we're seeing things like that. But on the most part, the state has run programs for rental assistance, utility assistance, and they've been so far pretty good. Although I was more worried to hear how many people might be facing eviction, and just I'm not hearing it. But I did talk to one of our largest housing developments in town, and she told me only 2 people were behind. So I was very pleasantly surprised to hear that. And because I think they have about 1,200 units. So it is definitely something that we haven't been impacted as much as the possibility could have been. So, but the homelessness, it just seems to be an impact more not of the COVID, but of housing. Housing costs have skyrocketed. The fair market rent has gone up about $200 per bedroom size for this year. It was one of the largest increases that I've seen. So we are seeing some of those impacts, but it's mostly impacting people being able to afford to be able to house themselves and things like that. So we're really seeing that kind of crisis occur, but it's not just Merrimack, it's across the state. So this is what we're seeing. So I always worry about that housing cost budget to make sure that we're in it, but this year we're running right on course, even with the homeless situation that's occurring. So hopefully next year's budget will hold too at this.
Okay. Peter?
Pat, yeah, amazing, up to 30 people. Are the criteria for the folks who qualify for your aid that are homeless, They already had established residents in Merrimack? They were already here and they lost their home,
No, the law actually that covers local welfare says whether they're a resident or not. They just physically have to be here, which
Okay.
is part of the biggest problem that's happening, because we do have those hotels that exist, and so people just, have to, look for the cheapest hotels, and sometimes we have some of the cheapest hotels. Then they actually, when they run out of money, then they can come and seek assistance. One of the things, though, and this is where I spend a lot of time and energy on it, is, I do a lot in trying to look for shelters for them and things like that. It's very rare. Like, out of the 32 contacts of homelessness, we only assisted 4 families. So it's 4, yeah. So it's something that it's, it was hard, like the beginning of COVID when we didn't have the shelters available. We also have, I'm really excited because there's some, Nashua Soup Kitchen and Shelter is actually just opening their Spring Street facility, which is gonna increase the amount of shelter beds that they have for families and for females and males. So that's gonna be really good. And also, Family Promise, which we do help and fund, is opening up a new facility at, in Nashua, which will actually increase their capacity too. So little things like this all help, and when we're dealing with this. But it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of, calling places, finding locations and things like that. It's a lot of work in trying to get people settled.
Just a follow-up, Pat. I'm looking on line 8399, Social and Health Services, and I see, it jumps out at me, and I know it was a request from Greater Nashua Mental Health. Was that their request for 33,000? And I know we agree, the town manager's proposing, and yourself, 13,000. Was that, they came to you with that number?
Yeah, I would say it's been a while, about 4 years ago, they changed their methodology of how they figure out in figuring out how much costs go to each municipalities based on ratios of people that are not insured, and how many people are in the communities and things like that they serve. So they changed how they were reporting, and it really increased quite a bit. And I didn't see the numbers of the people increase, so quite honestly, I mean, people can, when they do their proposals, I take a look at them. And I look to see whether or not, does this look justifiable? And I remember when they did that huge increase, I remember thinking the numbers didn't seem to add up to that huge increase. So I've been, when we have money, I know they do a lot of work, and I do depend on them quite a bit, because there's, they have a homeless outreach person who actually will come, and if I have a mental health person, especially a homeless person, they'll come and actually work with them and take them to the shelters, and so she's really good. But so and I do refer there a lot for intakes and things like that, and they also have the new crisis intervention program that's there now, so they do a lot of work, and they're very good in the community, but I just didn't see that justifiable increase when they changed their methodology of how they were going to ask us for money.
And I think one thing we can't forget is they provide a service to the police department, when they'll assist us regarding, or the police department, old habits die hard. But they assist the police department in call-outs. They have teams that come out when you have a person in crisis, and maybe the
Yeah,
captain.
it's a
or
crisis.
the deputy chief and the chief can address that, but if you talk to them. But I know that back in the day, they were very helpful. The other thing was, I remember last year, we talked about one of the charities here, Lamprey River, and we couldn't, I
Lamprey
guess there was
Health.
an issue, we didn't fund any money for them, and there was some questions of where are they from, how much are they helping our community, and now I see there's 5,000 in the budget. So I'm just curious, did something change? Did we identify that they actually are helping our community and so forth?
Well, it was a mistake on their part. They forgot to do the deadline, and they didn't get the proposal in, and then they were like horrified. I think they finally realized it somewhere in the spring that they had forgotten, so they were like, oh my gosh, can we do it again next year? I says, the proposal's always open. But they do, Lamprey Health is one of those agencies that they are a community health service that provides some service beyond what other, doctor's offices and things provide, especially for the indigent. So if there's people who have large co-pays or deductibles, a lot of people have insurances, but there's still large deductibles. They will absorb the deductibles and things like that for people who have lower incomes. So it's still an important service for those families that have low income, especially for the pregnant women, is the big thing that I see, that we want to make sure that they get those services.
One last question on this, and I won't ask any more. Health service near and dear to my heart, St. Joseph Community Services, Meals on Wheels. It looks like that went down about $1,000. Well, yeah, about $1,000. Is there a reason for that?
They just requested less.
Okay.
I don't know. The one thing I do know, the year before that, though, they stopped their transportation services. And we were funding part of that. And so they lost their van. And so when they did that, they also, the maintenance and everything like that was associated with that van went. And so they did reduce. But this year I noticed it's under there's a new director there, and I noticed it just came in less, so.
Yeah. New director is a Merrimack boy, John Eric Kezzo.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
Born and raised here. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Finley?
To Peter's question on the Lamprey Area Health, did they go 2 years in a row without a request?
No, it was just 1 year, and actually, I was just noticing that, I think, I might have made a mistake in that there's a dash under 2019, 2020. I think we did fund them that year, so I was looking at that, I was like, wait a minute, why is there 2 dashes? So I might have made a mistake on that one,
All right.
but
Yeah,
I
'cause
think it was only
think I
1 year.
remember when you told us what had
Yeah.
happened, I remember that. So I was just wondering, Pat, if because of our new hotels, relatively new hotels, and it's apparently impacting to a degree our homeless situation, our housing situation, do you, when you checking on people to see if they're able to receive assistance, do you check into from where they may have come?
I do, and, because of the law, it states that, someone can apply where, if they're in your community. There's no residency requirement on length of time. However, I do check to see where they came from, because, like, for example, I just had a couple who, they said where they were from, and so therefore I called that office of that particular welfare office, and come to find out that they had offered them shelter and the people had refused. So in that case, I offered them shelter, but I did direct them back to that community as opposed to what I would normally do in Greater Nashua, because it was more in the Greater Manchester area. So in that case, I do look to see where they come from, especially and just in logistics. Sometimes their kids are still in school, and so, having them go back to the community closer to where their school system is very important too. So it's not just, I'm dumping them back. I'm looking to see, what makes the most sense for that family, and were they, what was going on before with the other municipality.
Because last year, I remember you had told us that we couldn't say Nashua was a better place, it's cheaper rentals, you should go down there.
We can't.
But I had heard some communities, large communities near us, in fact, have done that. And so that's the reason I was wondering
Yeah.
if you had these conversations.
Actually, I find that it's usually the bigger communities around us, and I have to say the two being Manchester and Nashua, or right in between them there, but they're very good. I did have one of the Nashua director call me because they had a fairly large family and they couldn't find a placement for them in a hotel. And they did say that they placed them in the Residence Inn in Merrimack, but they paid for them while they were there. So, most of the time, I'd say the local welfares, they know, maybe, we try to communicate and talk too, so that we're all, but dumping is what we call, it's a terminology we use, and we try not to do that. It's a more of an ethical thing, but it's not something that, that we try to do. But will I look to see if people came from different areas, and does it make sense when I'm looking for shelter for them to go back toward that area? Yes, but I'll also look to see if they're working, where they're working, because I'm not gonna send them back to, Keene if they're working in like Dover or something like that, or, but, so it really has to do with, it is a lot of work to just try to look at the whole situation and do the best you can in making those referrals and find the shelters for them.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Actually, my question's for Paul. Paul, under the CARES Act, because the shelters were closed in the early days and we had to actually house people because the shelters were closed, can we get reimbursed for that under the CARES Act?
Already did.
Good, thank you.
He was right on top of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just so that I understand, Harbor Care used to be Harbor Homes, is that correct?
Correct.
When did they change their name?
This past fall,
It was, okay.
yes,
And-
it's
and-
been,
And we're
Yes.
commingling the task force and Keystone Hall completely under Harbor Care.
yes, and that's something you might notice is that, I think because of the audit that they had, it really, Harbor Homes kind of took in, every time a agency needed a home, I guess Harbor Homes, they kind of took them in, but what happened was they would still kind of operate independently, but they just had an audit last couple of years ago, and the audit said you really can't do it that way. You've got to act like a umbrella agency, and so therefore I noticed they came in this year as one agency. So the 3 programs that were funded, which was Harbor Homes, which is now Harbor Care, Keystone Hall, and the HIV task, right, AIDS task force, they all came under, and they did one proposal. But it actually was less than the combined 3, so I was like, all right.
Are they still operating under Partnership for, it used to be known as Partnership for Better Living, and there was.
Yeah, and I
like,
think they've,
variety of
I
different
think
things
they've
under
shortened
the
that
umbrella.
down to Harbor Care.
Okay, okay. Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the only question I was gonna ask was about that. You said that Harbor Care actually came in less than the sum of the 3 from last year? That was their request, as
Yeah,
opposed to
between,
cutting
if
them
you
back?
added up the 3 proposal,
Right.
what we spent last year on the 3 programs, it was like 10,238, and they only asked for 8,000.
Okay,
So I was like, all right, maybe they've got
fine with me. I
better
just,
coordination now in management, but, I don't usually give them more if they don't ask for more, so,
I appreciate that.
yes.
I'm sure the taxpayers do too.
Yes.
Any other questions for welfare? Pat, you do an amazing job. Thank you very much
Oh,
for
you're welcome. Do
all
you
you're
have
doing.
any questions on the transportation? I know Paul said you had
That's a good
some.
question.
I actually did, thank you for I have one question regarding the 2021 line. The ridership went up by 6, but the comment is currently running at 50%, so I'm trying to understand, are they still servicing 225 riders, but they're only running 50% of the time? Is that how I'm reading that?
It's not really running 50% of the time. I think it's just that there's less participation 50% of the time.
Okay,
So they still, if you notice, there's a lot of people registered. So, but because of COVID, a lot of people too are probably in a very high risk area. And this has been a problem, I think, all over where people have reduced their doctor's appointments, procedures, things that they would normally do. So things have gone down as far as transportation services requests for rides, it seems like. And that's not unusual. It's also, there was a period of time when the whole thing started with COVID that they were actually shut down too. So there was a period of time, I think, between March and I think it might have been May or something, or June, that they were actually not physically able to do services. So that is gonna reduce things down too during that time. But I think they slowly are getting back to capacity, but it's been a slow process and just trust process too. I think it's hard for, once the older people need to get their vaccines so that they'll be able to get out there.
Did they communicate with you any rationale why the hourly cost went up $5?
It's the personnel costs. They've also incurred, trying to keep their drivers and things like that, so they've had to pay more in order to keep their drivers.
Okay.
Otherwise, they're rolling out too. So it's more of a personnel cost that I noticed when I was looking at it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Peter's got a question.
Peter?
Pat, just one thing. It says 225 riders. Is that 225 rides given or 225 individuals who use that service?
It's 225 people that are registered to get the service.
Okay.
So that means 225 people in Merrimack have registered that if they need this transportation, they can call and schedule a ride.
Great.
But it doesn't mean that everybody's gonna get a ride. It's only that they're scheduled or registered for it. They qualify. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
So the amount we fund them is just a single payment, it's not a per rider type payment, right? Or
No,
per ride?
they figure out the costs, and actually there's a 50% federal match on a cost, so we pay whatever 50% matches for the costs. And so that's where they come up with the amount of money based on the estimation of hours, the estimation of costs, which is the hourly costs, and then they do 50% of that is what they request from us.
Okay. So this year, they're requesting the same amount as this past year, but they haven't done nearly as much service-wise this year.
No, they definitely have reduced, I think, services, but I think they're anticipating hopefully to get back to normal next year. And so therefore, that is something, I know they've had, I only because I'm involved in some of the transportation committees and things like that, they've had to do a lot of PPE things with their buses and things like that to make, so they've had some costs and things that they've had to incur, but they definitely had less people.
But that should have all been covered by CARES, I would have thought, but as opposed to us having to
Yeah.
fund that kind of stuff, but.
Yeah, well, I think for this year, I don't know if there will be a less reduction from that, but I don't think they can carry that forward from year to year, but you're right, there probably will be less money spent because of the fact that less people are taking services and rides. But the other problem is too, we're split into fiscal years, so I think hopefully by July, things will start picking up, and this is what we're looking at is starting for this fiscal year is July. So, but they usually try, if you noticed, they do try not to increase it unless they have to. So if you notice, usually it's about 3 years, they try to, and they only increase it if they really feel they have, outstanding costs that they have to pass on. So it goes back and forth, but that is something that I thought you might be interested to see and how it works there. Something else too, and just if you don't mind if I ask the council, I'm indulging the council on this question. There's also a funding proposal that's coming forward from the from this transportation services through community transportation. There's some funding coming through on a possible feasibility study on improving ridership and volunteer ridership programs and coordinating rides that are going on within the greater Nashua area. So Nashua Regional Planning Commission asked me to approach you, and I probably will bring this up on the agenda on January 28th, to see if you would be interested in doing a support letter for this feasibility study. Because if this works, then the people, elderly people could do, like, call this one person, and then they could work on, you know, getting this person a ride, as opposed to that one person now trying to find their own rides in the various sea of volunteer programs, transit programs, and things, Medicaid, insurance programs. There's so many different things that we're piecing together for transportation, but this is something that could really work for a lot of people in Merrimack.
Okay,
Okay.
so you're gonna bring that forward at another meeting?
Yeah, I just didn't think this was, I don't
Yeah.
want to tie up the budget
All
time,
right.
but I just wanted to let you know that that's coming.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate, are there any other questions? Nancy?
Good question, Pat. Yes, you do a terrific job. And
Oh, thank you.
I think everyone here agrees with that, and it's can't be said often enough. With that, however, quick question. I know that it's riders registers 225. Do you know if they do keep track of the amount of rides they do give Merrimack residents? Do they even do that, do you know?
Yeah, it's in the number of trips there. It's just that it's not for that particular year, but if you see,
Okay,
like
that-
fiscal year
okay.
19
So it doesn't
to
reflect
20,
that.
it's like we had 1,217 trips.
Okay, so they don't have that for this past year because of the COVID?
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, COVID and the fact that we're still in that past year.
Yeah, we're still in sort of the fiscal year.
But it's interesting that it's running about 50%, so. Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much,
All
Pat.
right, thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate-
Pat.
Moving right along, that brings us to library. Which is somewhere in here. Thank you. Some of us are slower than others.
I know,
Clean up after themselves, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Between Sharon and the rest of the departments, and we have ingrained that with everybody's grade now.
Very good. Did you introduce this at all, Paul, or we?
As you know, the library is run, the budget is brought through the director of the library through the library trustees. The library trustees meet to discuss the budget. I believe we met, it's been so long now.
Yeah,
right
we
around
had
Veterans
multiple
Day.
meetings, and then we met with you
Yeah.
one time, too.
Around Veterans Day, they met with me to go over some of the questions that they had, and then they formulate their budget and they bring it to the town council for the town council's review on the budget. One thing for the listening audience is that if there is a cut to be made to the library budget or an add to be made by the town council, they add to the bottom line, and then the library trustees bring it through their budget. So basically, you're looking at the bottom line of the budget when we go to review the library budget. This is a little different than any other department budget. But with the library, because they have their own board of trustees, the trustees then would take those cuts and present
Work
them
with
throughout their whole budget, or if it was an increase, would throw that through their whole budget. So with that being said,
Thank you. I'm Deborah Koval. I'm the chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and I'm going to speak to the budget overall, but I also have Janet Krupp, the treasurer of the Library Board of Trustees, who knows everything about the budget, so I brought her with me. You'll notice our bottom line for our budget this year is less than last year. It is this year $1,212,000. I'm sorry, $212,156. We are contributing more from the trustees' funds. We are very lucky to have had trust funds generously bequeathed to the library for the trustees to spend. So this year we are we are giving $12,000 towards that bottom line, which brings our budget that we're coming to you with town funds would be $1,200,156. So that's the general overall. We really took a look at how we could continue to provide excellent services to the townspeople, how to make the best use of the funds. But it is less than it was last year. But we are welcoming any questions that you have about specific items, if there's anything you'd like to.
Are there any specific changes in here that would be interesting to us and/or the townsfolk as far as maintenance of the building or staffing or?
There was a decrease in staffing, which Janet could speak to specifically, and we did decide to use some of that more towards the services that we're providing to people. So, Janet, did you want to speak to that?
Sure. So, under the hourly wages, which is 8104, is that right? Yeah. There was a decrease of close to 20,000.
Would you mind dropping your mask enough to be able to hear a little bit better?
Better?
Yes.
Helps
much
if I
better.
actually
Thank
talk
you.
into the microphone too. So there was a decrease of over $20,000, and most of that is because we removed one of our full-time positions, so it actually carried out through Social Security and retirement and all the other benefits. And then we also added another part-time reference librarian, so that helps out that department because we only had 3 people and we needed more coverage. So there was a decrease in wages for that section. And then the other major highlight that I want to bring up to you is under materials, and I'm getting to it on my phone. There it is, which is 8450. That was an increase, but we realized throughout this year that we increased our digital offerings, which are all the audiobooks and the ebooks, as well as our databases, and then we also realized that people wanted the adult fiction. So those were the 3 areas that we increased. So with the increase from the materials and then the decrease from the staff, and then there were things here and there that like would go up 1,000, go down 1,000. It was, in my mind, kind of a wash. Our line was pretty consistent with last year.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions from the council? So relative to COVID-19, obviously you guys were closed for a while and now you're open, but you have some restrictions on being able to stay at the library. You're supposed to come and get your stuff and go, right? Or something like that. How are things going as far as activity and budgets and things are concerned?
Yeah, we did take a look at, how the statistics going into this and seeing what were the needs, and that's what Janet was speaking to, that we really have wonderful statistics that Yvette and the staff keep so we can see where we should be focusing money and services. As far as how it's going on a day-to-day basis, I know every time I go in there are people going in and out there using it. Yvette could probably speak more to how it's impacting things, but we do need, the digital services have increased. We've seen a lot of, that is not going to go away, right?
No.
Even with COVID going away, that will not go away. So we want to make sure that we're doing that and we're continuing to address the needs that our public is expressing to us through their usage and how we can meet those services. One of the things we did get were hotspots this year also, which was something that were very useful to people. So that's, something that Yvette and the staff identify. This is something people need. They need to be able to get Wi-Fi access wherever they are. We can provide that to them. So we're always looking at ways to improve it that way.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Yvette, or did you want to?
Well, in terms of the service, like the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you didn't have the interaction of people for a while, but now you're back to that, and so you need staffing to be able to manage the library and keep it clean
Yeah,
and things like that. But
yes.
is there any other impacts that you foresee in this coming budget or? Just that-
We offered outside reference services, and we started that up July 1st. So we were back working with the public very quickly, I think. Curbside services, that's continuing. I think people find it convenient, besides if they're feeling a little uncomfortable coming into a public space. We've taken all of the measures that were recommended to us to make the the space safe. What we're asking people to do at this stage, we're still in this stage, come in and you can spend 2 hours. So you can reserve a table if you want to work at a table. You can reserve a computer if you want to work at a computer. You can take a laptop outside and sit outside or sit in your car, depending on how comfortable you are with that. So we're hoping to increase the time that someone can stay. And that's stuff that we study in terms of, 6 feet distance, 10 minutes, unmasked, positive COVID. So we're just trying to space people out and space their visits out. But come in every day for 2 hours and use your computer. That's fine. The meeting rooms are still being occupied with quarantining the materials that are returned and spreading out the staff. We're still doing that. We're looking at, Saturday is really busy. And talking with the staff, talking with the trustees, at what point do we want to extend Saturday hours? Because normally we would be open 9 to 1. Now we close at 12:30, so the staff can close and clean in that last half hour. But, because we don't have our evening hours fully open to 9, we're seeing that a lot of people do their library business on Saturdays. My head of children's was just saying today in a meeting that the children's room was hopping on Saturday, 2 families, so compared to, the other previous Saturdays, people are starting to be more comfortable to get out, and maybe hopefully they're confident that we're doing what we need to do to keep them safe. But in terms of like big changes, I don't foresee big changes. I think we're at a really good level in terms of staffing and what we're able to do, and electronic services and what we're able to offer. Hopefully the meeting rooms can open up soon and we can get back to in-person programming, hosting meetings for different, committee groups and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Peter?
I see 77,000 in the capital outlay. What is that for?
Hold on a second, Peter, let me get there.
What number is that?
That's on the bottom line here. I'm just looking at
Oh,
capital.
literally at the bottom. Okay,
Yes.
Oh.
77,000.
Number doesn't ring a bell. Oh, the capital refunds deposit for $75,000, Peter?
I'm sorry?
No.
Well, there's
Total. Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Tom. Basically, the $77,000 is made up of capital refund transfer for building maintenance, for the capital improvement plan of $75,000, and then they have $2,000 for office equipment. So those 2 items. So one's a deposit into capital reserve funds, and they do, out of the capital reserve, it's everything. It's roof, it's building, it's the front walkways, the walkways, the sidewalks, everything comes out of the capital reserve fund. So,
Thank you.
elevators.
Is that like the step repair that they're doing now?
The step repair, they budgeted that over several years. I think it was a couple of years that it was in the works, and that comes out of that capital reserve fund as well. And I believe next year, they're looking potentially at an HVAC study and maybe some repairs to the elevator as well. And you'll see that tomorrow night in the capital reserve plan. I'm trying to go off the top of my head.
In the
Yeah.
CIP? Yeah.
CIP.
Yeah, that thick chunk of our, yep. Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank
efforts
you.
to continue to function with everybody and allow us all back in the library and stuff.
So Mrs. Krupp, does your husband approve of your face mask?
He has his own.
I understand. Is he happy with the postseason? I kind of expected. He's a huge Bills, Mrs. Krupp's husband is Gary Krupp, and he's a huge Bills fan, so.
Versus being Patriots.
This is correct, so. Anyway, thanks to the library, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder what's up now.
Pouring-
Wastewater?
He's
I
pulling,
think it's wastewater.
Moving along to to Parks and Rec.
he's pulling a Pat Murphy.
Parks and Rec is,
Parks and Rec makes it a lucky number.
there you go. As you can see from their org chart, it's a very busy organization in the summertime. We have 2 full-time staff year-round, and we have 1 part-time person year-round that helps with the maintenance of all those buildings down at Wasserman Park. When summer camp kicks in, when the summertime kicks in, Matt has a lot of employees with counselors and managers of the day camp and things of that sort, so the department really does explode. But I'll just want to say there are just 2. In the Department 13, there's only 2 full-time and 1 part-time, plus some of the lifeguards at Town Beach as well, that are in this budget. And Matt will talk to you about that a little bit. Ideally, Matt's budget is besides the 53rd week of service and the retirement is pretty much leveled, except for some decreases in water and gas and electricity based on 3-year historic trends in the buildings. As you know, I think it was almost, 3 or 4 years ago, we decided to put heat in the basement of the function hall. And so we were really looking at estimates and trying to guess where we'd be at with some of this stuff. And right now, we have some more solid numbers. That's why the gas line went down, and the water, that's based on historic watering of some of the parks and areas that fields, athletic fields and things of that sort. Those are actual numbers. Another line that kind of went up a little bit, like I said, was part-time wages. And I believe in the budget, Matt put together some funding for the lifeguards, so that, as you know, during the last summer, we had people down there working and things of that sort. So Matt's kind of theory is to include them this year in the budget so that he could have 2 people down at the waterfront during the summer months to track the individuals going down to make sure they're Merrimack residents and things of the sort. Besides that, now that Matt has his presentation up, I will pass it over to Matt. Couple other things before I do, though. The Adult Community Center and MYA both came in and asked for roughly $5,000 increases on both their budgets due to higher operating expenses and things and COVID stuff. And then the last one is a little bit of an increase in infrastructure of $4,200. And that's basically what we're looking at there we're doing the waterfront project this spring. So when we're doing that, we look to also move up the dock replacement schedule. And that could potentially be something that there might be significant money due to savings in other areas of town that we can actually purchase the docks out of the current year budget. So that could be something that could potentially be reduced when we come and do a finalized budget, and the tune of about $41,000. We potentially can take that out of this year's money because of salary savings and other things throughout the town, and reimbursements that we got from COVID expenditures. I'm done now.
Thanks, you took half of what I was going to say. Don't worry, I can talk, though.
You can cover for it?
I can cover for it. So, good evening, members of the council. Thank you for having me this evening. It was really an odd year for us, to say the least.
I think that's an understatement.
We're a social group, and so, and provide social services and kind of quality of life. And so when COVID hit, 75% of our stuff got canceled right off the bat, and that's tough for us. It was such an odd feeling. We usually run, 200 plus programs a year, and we lost, like I said, 3/4 of them this year. The biggest heartbreak obviously was, camp getting canceled. That was the first time in 25 years for me professionally that I didn't have camp running. And we had about 5 minutes where we said, wow, what are we going to do? What are we going to have, maybe we'll get caught up on some other projects. And then, of course, we started having all the problems with Watson Park and Wildcat Falls, and that was the rest of our summer, you know. Yeah, you know, it was what it was. But that was tough for us. You know, but we kind of got up and underway. We like I said, we spent most of the summer dealing with, you know, those issues at those places. But we were able to get our summer concerts in. We were averaging about 100 people of social distance a week. We got 3 movies in the park in the summer. We had, you know, park attendants at, you know, we supervised the park attendants at Watson Park, Wildcat Falls, and Wasserman, and managed to get through the summer, you know, relatively unscathed, you know. You know, we got into the fall and you know, we still weren't running kind of we were slowly starting to run direct programs, you know, a lot of outdoor-based things, you know, people weren't really comfortable at that point going indoors. We actually saw a fairly sizable increase in kind of adult program participation. Usually our kids are our bread and butter. And we were getting some kid participants early in the fall. And then as soon as the schools kind of went to full remote, kids stopped participating. But we've seen a fairly continuous increase in kind of adult program participation. We usually run, you know, wilderness first aid, for example, you know, a couple of times a year. And while we didn't have the staff, normally we run it with in-house staff, but we weren't bringing anybody on, but we were able to contract out to the provider that gives us the certifications. And they're doing it, and the classes are selling out as soon as we open registration. And, you know, so again, it's an outdoor-based class, and so those types of things have done really well for us. In the fall, you know, in October, we managed to figure out how to do a socially distant time ticket entry Halloween party, you know, with 300 people. And it, you know, it was a different experience, but it came out pretty well, and people told us they felt safe. And then we moved into, obviously, you know, modified plans for Christmas with the Santa's Tour of Merrimack with the help of the fire department, and we did a holiday food drive with Santa right out here on the sidewalk, and had 70 families come through and donate food. I had 2 carloads full to take to each of the 2 food pantries here in town, which was really nice, and they definitely appreciated that. 2 weeks ago, we were able to run kind of our first, I wouldn't say bigger program, but our first real solid program of, we did school vacation week. And, you know, we had 8 kids a day, socially distanced, masks indoors, and it went pretty well. You know, well, I should say that. It went really well. You know, again, people felt safe. They enjoyed the program. We had a lot of the parents that participated. You know, I think 6 or 7 out of 8 of them, of the 8 families, you know, wrote to us after and said, "Oh, thank you for doing this," because, you know, we didn't have the care. So, you know, we're looking ahead to February and doing the same thing, and we've already got more trying to sign up for February than we did for December. At the end, you know, one of the challenges last summer, realistically with camp, was going to be the requirement that, you know, you could only have 10 people in a group, and, you know, counting staff. So realistically, you're talking 8 kids and 2 staff. And financially, that was just tough to do. At the end of the summer, the governor updated the regulations for childcare and changed it to 20. And so that's kind of the guidelines that we're following when we did school vacation week. And obviously, again, it makes it much more affordable, you know, palatable to be able to, you know, do it effectively and not be losing money and, you know, those kinds of things. And like I said, we're starting to get pretty good at figuring out new ways of doing it, you know, kind of building off all the stuff that we built last summer, you know, trying for camp, and, you know, how does this work? And, you know, so I've got, you know, full policies written out on, you know, how does indoor programs work, and you know, for not only for us, but contractors. We've had a few we were doing rentals in September and October, and then when it got cold, those kind of stopped up for a little while. But we did some. Like I said, after 10 months of doing this, we're getting better at it. You know, we're working on Winter Carnival right now, and Winter Carnival is going to look kind of like Halloween did. You know, socially distanced, time ticket entry, events, you know, dedicated walking path around the park. And so I think that one will go well. And so then, of course, as you know, we always work kind of 3 to 6 months in advance. So as I'm working on Winter Carnival, I'm also starting to think about Easter. It's like, I've got 10,000 Easter eggs sitting in my office from last spring. I'm going, I got to use these this year somehow. I'm not sure how yet, but we're working on it, you know. But it's getting there, you know, and it's you know, with the vaccine starting to come out, it seems like lights at the end of the tunnel, you know. The hope obviously is that camp is running this summer. I think a lot of the things that we put into place that we were planning to do for camp last year will probably still be in place in some fashion, you know, this summer. You know, but it seems like widespread vaccines hopefully is May, June timeframe, you know, based on what the governor says. We kind of religiously watch his press conferences every week and you know, to follow along there. But I'll get back to camp in a second here. As Paul mentioned, at Wasserman Park, you know, we spent the last 2 years working on the permits for the beach renovation project. We find, you know, and it was the state workers, DES, they were working remote through all of this. And so it's like, and they wouldn't take submissions electronically. So it's like you mail the packet to them, wait a week for them to go into their office once a week to pick up their mail, wait another week for them to mail, you know. And so we finally got our permits for the beach in December. We were expecting to have them back in September, and it's just time frame of, but we have them. I think, Paul, I know Dawn's working on the specs. I don't know if they've gotten to you or not yet, but I know she was working on them as of a couple of weeks ago. So that'll be ready to go for this spring. So with that said, as you know, our budget is broken down into two components, our kind of the taxpayer-funded side, and then the recreation revolving fund. And so we'll start with the taxpayer-funded. And realistically, there's, as Paul said, there's only a lot of the stuff in the budget that's changed is things that we don't have control over. You know, utilities, electricity, water. Paul tells us what the number is, and that's what's in there. You know, so the first one is our part-time wages, and you know, as I said last summer, you know, realistically to properly enforce, and what we learned last summer was to properly enforce kind of the residency restriction, we really need 2 people down at the waterfront. You know, one kind of at the waterfront itself, one down by kind of the parking lot, to kind of, there's multiple ways to get into the beach, and so 2 people realistically you need to kind of cover that. And, you know, last summer we had, you know, the weekend staffing, you know, which started as 1 by July, or by the end of July, we went up to 2 because we found we needed that. And then we ended up having, by August, we ended up having to have Public Works coming in on overtime to cover kind of weekday evenings, because I didn't have any staff available to work, because again, we were seeing a lot of kind of nighttime parties and things coming in at, you know, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and to kind of squash those issues. And so, you know, again, last summer everybody was kind of flocking to any kind of open space, particularly those with water. You know, and you know, COVID's still going to be present in some form this summer. People have found that location. You know, we've kind of addressed with the fencing at Watson Park, so hopefully we won't have those challenges there this summer. And Wildcat Falls is, you know, a different animal, but you know, obviously Wasserman Park is the one that we're kind of focused on with staffing. Now, in a normal year, we would have, you know, the taxpayers have paid for 2 lifeguards, which is normally they're working Monday through Friday, kind of covering the public beach, kind of in conjunction with the lifeguards that are also working for the camp. But we haven't had lifeguards on the weekends down there it's been at least 10 years. I've been here 7 now, and it predates me certainly. And I think it's 10 is the last I could tell. And so what we're looking to do this year, rather than 2 park attendants as we did last year, what I'm actually looking to do is the park attendant plus restoring weekend lifeguard coverage. As I said, the taxpayers have typically funded kind of Monday through Friday 2 of those lifeguard positions. We're going to stretch them out they're covering more on the weekends. My camp will kind of pick up lifeguard coverage on the weekdays a little bit more. But what we're hoping to do is basically weekends from kind of 10 to 6, 11 to 7 on Saturdays and Sundays. You know, in theory, camp's in operation Monday through Friday, kind of 8 to 4, and then having kind of the weekday evening lifeguards until, you know, probably 7, I'm thinking, as well as that kind of weekday evening park attendant, just again, in response to those issues we saw last summer. Plus, when you combine the fact that we are going to be renovating the beach, we do expect more people to start using said beach. Prior to COVID, we used to see about 100 people a day at the beach. Last year, we were averaging, especially early on, before we really were able to crack down on things, we were seeing, you know, 300 or 400 people a day down there on the weekend. So again, we are expecting more usage. But as I said, you know, previously the taxpayers have funded 2 positions. We're basically adding a half a position to that to make the coverage work out. So it's not a significant jump on that, but again, it is adding more time to the park attendant hours from what we have traditionally done, which accounts for those increases in both the park attendant line item and the lifeguard line item. And then the other one related to that is the waterfront director. Historically, the town has paid for half of the waterfront director's salary. The camp has paid the other half. But again, that person has historically only worked Monday through Friday. This person will now oversee kind of both, kind of the 7-day-a-week operations. One of the 2 lifeguard positions will turn into a supervisor, so that either the waterfront director or his assistant will always be there kind of 7 days a week. So it fluctuates the math a little bit. But that's the gist of what we're looking to do this year. We did also reclassify the director's salary. This actually happened last year, recognizing kind of the increased workload that they're going to be doing and trying to get somebody with more experience in managing all of that. So they oversee, like I said, all the lifeguards, both the camp lifeguards and the town lifeguards, as well as supervising the park attendants and the swim instructors. And so that is kind of the part-time wages piece of it. And again, most of the other stuff is in the budget. Realistically is level funded until we get down to all the way down to 8505, which is infrastructure account. And so we have two projects in here this year that we're looking to do that have been on our list for several years now. The first one is the Wasserman Park dock replacement. Our docks are wooden with a foam substructure, and they are basically at the end of their lifespan. We spend a good bulk of our time trying to kind of keep maintaining them. They're at 29 years old at this point. They live in the water year-round, mostly because if we tried to pull them out, the thought is that they're going to break. We actually had a lot of issues this summer where people, what tends to happen is the sideboards that it's kind of half in, half out of the water, they rot, they fall off, people pull them off. But then when they pull them off, people can get access to underside. And so people are actually pulling the foam out of the docks. And these are big pieces of foam. They're like 100 pounds a piece, especially and more so when they're soaking wet. And so they're actually kind of destroying the docks as they do it. And so we spend a lot of time kind of just constantly fixing them. The current docks are an H-shaped configuration, but one of the things we are looking to do this year when we replace that, you know, it's $42,000 to replace what's there with kind of modern dock materials. One of the things we're looking to do is actually kind of simplify the dock design and make it is essentially 2 long L's going out into the lake, and there's a picture here on the screen, which would be anchored by posts at the, you know, out in the lake instead of having the crossbar that kind of supports either side of them. What this actually does is gives us better line of sight for the lifeguards that are staffing, you know, if they're staffing it from the shoreline, they have a direct line of sight out into the water. Right now they're having to do their scanning. They're on the end of the dock kind of looking in instead of on the shoreline looking out. but when they're in the current H configuration, they're kind of having to look kind of 180 degrees, so this gives them better line of sight. It reduces the cost, by not quite half, but down to $26,000. And again, just makes it a much nicer dock. We originally were actually looking at kind of a lowercase, an uppercase L design, which looks like, where is it? We were originally kind of contemplating this design, and one of the pieces of feedback we heard from kind of the public this summer was, when we were talking to people about it, was they were concerned about kind of losing some of that dock space. This particular design here would be using kind of the right-hand side of the beach, because that's where all the lily pads are, and the docks would also kind of help hold that out. But then you'd have no dock separating kind of the swimming area, in the enclosed docks from the kind of open swimming area to from the public, and so that we had some concerns about that, Normally when camp's in session, the camp tends to use the docks itself, and we ask the public to use kind of the open swimming area to the left, so they would lose, in this design, they would kind of lose all access to the docks realistically, which is why that we went to this modified, this new design, which costs slightly more than the other design, but I think is better overall in the long run. But basically, it's a 50-foot dock with a 10-foot accessible ramp leading into it. As part of the renovation project that we're doing this spring, obviously they're going to scoop all the mud and muck and clean out the swimming area and make it a much nicer beach to swim at. When you come down into the beach, obviously you'll go down a series of stairs initially, but then it'll be flat sand over to the water's edge. And then we'll be able to from there, we'll be able to kind of improve accessibility overall anyway, with this design. So that's kind of the first project we're looking at. And then the second one relates to my office here. We are here in this building at Wasserman Park year-round. Overall, the building's not in bad shape. Our roof is at the end of its lifespan. We had all of the roofs in the park we evaluated 2 years ago, and the contractor gave us kind of a recommended replacement schedule for all the buildings, and this is the one that's due this year. The roof is $4,800, which isn't too bad, but the second piece of this project is an ADA access ramp. This is a project we initially had on our list probably 5 years ago now. And then other more pressing issues came up in the park. We took down Wasserman House, some of the cabins that had to come down, those kinds of things. And so money went to, kind of more urgent needs. But realistically, it is a public building, and it's not ADA accessible, and it really should be. So we were hoping to tackle kind of those two pieces of that project within our budget, in this line item this particular year. And with that said, and before I move on to kind of the programming side of things, does any other questions on any of that?
Just out of curiosity, does the public need to access your office?
If they come in to register or those types of things, they would. And actually, the audit problem is right now, there's a set of concrete steps there, and actually the step into the office is actually out of code too. So it's too tall of a step. So in the summer, we have a fairly steady stream of foot traffic. This time of year, not so much, but during the summer, we certainly do. And I know we've talked in past years about, could we move to, say, the function hall, which is accessible? The problem there is getting to the function hall in the winter, especially when we have a big snowstorm. Sometimes it's a day or two before the function hall is able to get plowed out and get down there. So it still becomes an accessibility issue there. So, like I said, it is a project we're looking to tackle this year.
I guess I hadn't realized that they actually came into that office for registration. I somehow assumed we did them elsewhere or
Yeah,
something.
no.
I've
I
never
mean, we
seen
do a lot
anybody use that
online,
building.
but in the summer, there's, people coming in for trail maps, questions, where's the dog park, registering for camp, can I park here, how do I get to the lake, pick up we have the parking placards that we issue out of our office. So, like I said, it is not accessible, and it really should be.
Okay. Peter, did you have?
Thanks, Matt. Just a couple of questions regarding your budget.
Yes.
First of all, I guess since that's in front of us, you know, I've been a big one of some of the old structures in the camp, and you know that, and I do believe you and your assistants need an office space, an appropriate office space, but when I look at that building, I feel like we're throwing good money at bad after bad, if that's the right way to say that, because I just feel like eventually that building's gonna have to go. It's old. It just seems to me it's not in great shape, so I'm just concerned. I mean, that's all. I've raised that issue. I mean, Paul, I mean, what do you see as the lifespan on that thing?
I think we had our building department go down and check out all the buildings, and I believe this building is, because of the foundation that's in there, it's actually in not bad shape. I know the roof definitely needs to be replaced. The chimney hasn't worked in years and doesn't work. We don't burn, we don't do anything with the chimney. We closed off the basement now, and we made that where it was like barn doors. We've closed that in, so it's been more sealed tight. This building is probably one of the better buildings shape-wise. Between this and the function hall, and the theater are probably the three best buildings on site. The other buildings, the cabins and things are not as well as this because of the use. And
I guess I just go back to the basement of the function hall, and I know, Matt, what you said about the snow access, but it's like anything else after a snowstorm. In any of our public buildings, it's gonna take a little while to get to them. And I think that if we were to, and they've done so much work on that building, and it would seem to me that that would be the more appropriate place to have you guys centrally located, as long as we know we have to have that plowed, that area plowed and salted. You know, I haven't been down have they finished the work under there?
No, the basement is still unfinished. It's been that way since that flood 10, 12, 13, however many years ago that was. So it's basically just an open, there's framing from the old original bedrooms down there, but not much else. It's a concrete floor. I mean, I do have it, I think it's 5 years, 25, 26, I think is when I tentatively have CIP money earmarked for the function hall basement, but I mean, it's gonna be $100,000 probably to finish the basement. I mean, it's 3,000 square feet down there, but it's, you know, you're gonna have to ramp the building to make the downstairs accessible. It's, you know, it's walls, it's sheetrock, it's floors, it's ceiling, it's gonna be a big project to do that. And I'd love to do it someday down the road, but I know we had this conversation last year about, is it worth spending that money? I mean, we talked about, you know, finishing, you know, like right now when we rent upstairs, you know, we can only really have one event in the building at a time because the bathrooms are in the back room, and so you can't have the front room only because there's no way to separate the two because there's no bathroom in the front room, you know. And so if you had the basement finished with, you know, meeting rooms and those types of things, then you could potentially have multiple events in the building. Now, this year it hasn't mattered a whole heck of a lot because we haven't had the demand that we had been having the last couple of years. But it's, like I said, it's gonna be a big project, and I'm guessing 70 to 100. I haven't
much?
actually.
70 to 100,000?
70 to 100,000, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
It could be more.
I mean, I guess if we're gonna eventually have to invest that,
Yeah.
if we wanted to use that, to me, I'd see it more useful as your offices and your staff's offices as opposed to a house, but I guess that's food for thought at that expense down the road, certainly not this year.
Right.
I'll jump along here real fast. Do we still have, I looked on your line items here, I see, we've got the money, you mentioned the beach, and they're gonna do the work this year. But I see in one of your line items in maintenance, $2,000 for washout of town beach. We're repairing this beach and creating it in such a way that should really limit that. Do we need $2,000 for washout and repair of beach?
That particular line item is not necessarily just washout of Town Beach. I think it's, technically it's lists, you know, flower beds and, I mean, there's 3 or 4 things in that particular category that money can be used for, you know. And while we don't spend it all every year, we do certainly on some years. And whether or not we will in the future, it's hard to say until the beach project's done and we kind of go through a year and see what happens.
Okay. I'm glad you were talking about the parking enforcement and address that. I know that when I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, going back 2 years, one of the things we were hoping to do was, getting a water line to the dog park. That hasn't been done yet, has it?
No, that was one we were working on this year.
Yeah.
It's been one of the projects that we've been talking to Public Works about. The challenge we're running into is we don't have the water pressure to get over there. So we started talking about it this summer, you know, when camp didn't run, and we need to do some sort of pump system to get enough water pressure over there. We're trying to build something off the back of the camp, the day camp office, and it's still in the works.
Okay, just curious about that.
Yep.
And the last thing I have here is, I noticed we have, we put aside, what is it, $5,000 a year for athletic field? Is that for the possibility of a future purchase of an athletic field?
That is for, that's really a placeholder, and it's starting to look like, once again, tomorrow night when you see the capital improvement plan, down at Martell's softball fields, replacement of those lights and towers. So it's more for replacement of some of the stuff that we already have in athletic fields. It's also the netting that we put at Trudowski has a 7 to 10 year useful life, so some of that money is to repurchase some of that netting as well. So that's what that $5,000 is going to be used for.
Right, because I know that one of the things also was, the long-term goals was, we were looking at the need for athletic fields as well as the school kind of worked together with them on that. So I didn't know if that was money being put aside for the eventual purchase of.
No, not to spoil tomorrow night's discussion, but.
Oh, really ruin it, huh?
Yeah, you're gonna ruin it. Technically, we have a placeholder for athletic fields, and we believe that with the purchase and build out of some of the athletic fields, that would be something that we'd have to bond. So this $5,000 is just for replacing things that are already in place.
All right, and Matt, I'm glad to see you finally getting the docks. I know you needed that. Thanks for answering my questions.
Were you finished with your presentation?
On that piece of it, I was gonna move on to the programming side if there, you know, but I wanted separate budget, so I wanted to
Okay.
get through this piece first.
Okay. Are there any other questions of this Parks and Rec budget? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess dovetailing off of Councilor Albert's comments regarding your office, I guess, how married are you to being at that particular location as opposed to finding another location somewhere else in town? Considering you have the camp office that's already there, that where the majority of the usage of Wasserman occurs in the summertime, so you do have a central location for that particular function, whereas there are other jobs that you are responsible for that might be maybe better served by being centralized here at Town Hall, or, and Paul is waving his finger at me, so
I'll take that question for you,
Okay.
Councilor Boyd.
Matthew, I'm sorry, I apologize. So can you answer that question? for me,
Yes,
please?
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. You
That's
did.
okay, but you know where I'm going with it.
Yes, I do know where you're going
Okay.
with it. About 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer than that, we used to bring the park director here and bring it down to Town Hall. What we found out, though, is by not having the park director or the Parks and Rec director down at Wasserman Park, there was a lot of vandalism that was occurring down there. For some reason or another, when they see a car in that front parking lot, they stop or do other things. We noticed that since Matt's been back down there, the vandalism has gone down drastically. The police calls are not as much. They would go on a Monday and check the park out after a weekend, and this cabin's been broken into, that cabin's been broken into, and then go back on Wednesday and place another call. This cabin's been broken into, this building's been broken into. With the people at the park full-time, they're able to walk around and do a search every day and find out this stuff. They're able to go down, and if the window is like, if you had been down there with the cabins' windows are shut by like a wooden shutter.
Right, yep.
If a wooden shutter is broken, they're able to say, okay, let's go fix that now because that's a problem. So having the person there has made it a better, less maintenance for us, so to speak, and less vandalism in the park. So is he married to it? I can't speak for that. But I would have to say that if we're going to keep the position, we would have to find a place at the park for them to be located, whether it's the function hall, whether it's this building here, whether it's the day camp office, but more so having a person there. And the other thing too is that people do come in and they do ask the questions.
And I apologize, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Again, dovetailing off of Councilor Albert's comments, getting back to, again, your narrative regarding the quality of the building, and I heard everything. I guess you don't have a number, like it's good for another 20 years or another 30 years. We really don't know the future lifespan of that building. You make the point, Councilor Arthos. That's correct. It's like a car.
It's like a car. I think the renovations and what we've done to the building and what we've looked at to do to this building, it has prolonged its life. One of the things definitely that would prolong the life of this building is a new roof. This is the first I heard about the cement steps and being out of code, but that's an easier fix with taking them out and building steps on that. They have that back porch there, to be honest with you. If that porch is there or not, it's not being used.
Yeah.
So we could take that down if it becomes unrepairable. That's not going to affect the structure of the building itself. The basement, now that it's sealed up, has made that building more sure. And it's not as drafty, it's not as expensive to operate because we do have that sealed up in the basement now. We're not parking vehicles in the bottom of the basement anymore, things of that sort. So I cannot give you, that building's going to last for another 50 years. I can't say that because like everything else,
Okay.
It depends on maintenance.
It depends on the maintenance of it. That chimney, right now, we have a problem with the function hall with our chimney. That chimney, I don't know. If something goes on with that chimney, we're going to have to maintain it, like we have to do at the function hall right now.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Matt, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
And I'll just add to that, I mean, probably 95% of the programs that we run are there, and also just function hall rentals, and, I have a part-time maintenance guy, so very often than not, if he's not, he works 8:30 to 1, and so if somebody needs to, if we have to set up for an event, it's probably gonna be me doing it at 3 in the afternoon for a nighttime thing versus, somebody else. And so if I'm at town hall, now I'm gonna drive over there and drive back, And, the other challenge we used to have when we would come back here for the winter, this was, 4 years ago, I think now.
Yeah.
Because we were on seasonal water in that building at the time. And we were in the attic of town hall, kind of above Eileen's office. And so if the public came to see us, they'd go to the town manager's office, they would call us down, and we'd kind of do transactions in their lobby, as it were, and so it was just hard to do anything, job interviews and, that kind of stuff, because we just we were in a tiny little cubicle upstairs, which is now used by somebody else anyway. I can't think of his name, Rob. And anyway, so, the park would certainly be the stronger preference, because again, things do take place there. We're in the function hall especially, almost every single day. It's just easier to maintain it and, those kinds of things. And Paul, or somebody mentioned the day camp office. The day camp office is a seasonal building. It can't be winterized. It's not built that way. It's a step above kind of the seasonal cabins, but it's not like I could operate out of the day camp office in the summer because camp is in there, my camp nurse is in there. There's not really room for James and I to turn around and also set up shop in there. It doesn't work.
Okay, Barbara? Any other questions at this point? So you mentioned that there were increases in the MYA and the Adult Community Center, but you haven't talked about that at all, so
I can.
you can talk about it. What's going on there? Why are we seeing those changes?
Especially with the Adult Community Center, because of COVID, they're seeing renters, and their rental income is down. So they're asking us to help us out a little bit with some, to cover some of those additional costs, because the rental income is down, and that's about $5,000.
Are
When we
they,
look at
they
that.
even open these days?
They are still not open. The only one who's in there is Meals on Wheels,
Right.
and that's it. They're planning, Nancy probably can, there was a meeting they had this week. Nancy's the liaison. She could probably talk more than I, but they are trying to get it opened. As you know, you approved that construction money for the
Yeah.
bathrooms, and they're trying to do that before they open it up as well. But they are trying to get it, the plate back open.
Yeah, the other thing, yes, that's true. And that certain amount of cost will continue. Once the activities are reestablished, there is going to be an increase in the PPE and whatever they need. They also have purchased on their own, an air circulator. Purifier, thank you. In fact, 2 of them to cover the area. So they're trying to plan ahead on what are the kind of things they're gonna need to do. And the custodian's gonna be used more than it is now for that purpose. So they felt that this was a reasonable modification. A little bit with the same with the MYA. The MYA is now every single, in fact, we had a meeting last night. Every single coach has had to establish, every sport has had to establish PPE kind of protocols, standards, cleaning balls, all that kind of stuff for every single sport. And again, this is just to cover an approximation, and part of that's gonna have to continue for next year. So that's a explanation for those 2.
Okay. Great, thank you. Barbara?
That's exactly what I was going to talk about, so I wasn't sure if it was coming up under programs or what.
No, it's, well, it's. part
So
of this
anyways,
budget
my
here.
questions regarding MYA is, and for those, if anybody out there is watching, the town gives them money for their programs in addition to funding the maintenance and electricity and whatnot for the building itself. So I just want, I don't think everybody knows that. So MYA under electricity, which is 8241, they're running at about $687 plus some cents per month. We putting LEDs in there? Because they don't run their outdoor lights that often. Just seems a little high for a building that's not used 24 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours a day.
The bulk of the electricity underneath the MYA is the ball field lights.
Is the what? I'm
The
sorry?
ball field lights.
Okay, so that's included in there?
That's included in that, yes.
Okay,
So
not
that's the
in the
bulk of
park
it.
area?
Yes, it's the ball field lights there.
Okay. And under 8245, does MYA run on a septic system? And I don't see any charges in here for septic at all. I see sewer, but I don't see septic. And I imagine Wasserman is running on septic.
The MYA is on sewer, too. If Bice Field's on sewer, MYA is on sewer. It's right on DW.
So there
yeah, I
must
would
be a
just-
charge somewhere, I think.
That would all be the $608 right there. That's the sewer for his whole, Martell,
Okay, Martell and everybody?
everybody, yeah.
Okay,
Everybody who's attached to sewer, that's the sewer.
okay. And when, back on the community center, again, 8377, they're using a PO box? They can't use town hall?
There's nobody,
For who? The Adult Community Center?
Community center?
They're using a PO box because what was happening is the mailman used to drop the mail off, and somebody would walk in the building and take the mail and throw it into this office or that office.
Oh,
So they were losing bills and checks.
okay.
So there was a decision made long ago to have a post office box and have all the mail delivered to a post office box. And the gentleman who is responsible for the Adult Community Center, Steve Dembo, is responsible to go and pick up the mail.
Okay. What's the annual meeting?
We were looking.
They have, because it's a senior center,
Mhm.
they have to have an annual meeting, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know what the $300 covers. I just know they need to have an annual meeting to elect officials.
The offices for the
officers and
senior,
things of that
yeah.
stuff, yeah.
That makes sense. And my last one on janitorial supplies, I know Counselor Harrington mentioned that, they have to buy more cleaning supplies than normal. But that's quite a jump to go from $500 to $2,000.
Well, it's also the custodian.
It's the custodian as
Yes.
well
As
as in
well.
that charge? Okay.
Yes.
And one other thing I just want to add while we're at it for the MYA, they've had a positive audit, as we've all been told. The MYA has received a positive audit results. And I think there was a meeting, I've had 4 meetings this week, MYA, Larry, wonderful here, anyway. And I did commend them for us as to what they've done to be able to get to the point of establishing that good audit, but also encourage them to continue with that. And they have not received their bill for the auditing yet, but whatever. I told them it was worth it because that would establish credibility with us and with the community. So I did that for us and told them that we appreciated their endeavors.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks. Paul, I'm just looking at Martell Field, the electricity, just as Barbara brought it up. It looks like $4,000 for electricity there. And you had mentioned earlier the netting at Trudowski Field, that's gonna cost us. Do we try and offset some of this by, the team fees, the league fees? I know that there's tournaments, softball tournaments that come in. Can we offset some of these costs with that?
The tournaments that come into town, if they want to use the lights, there's a fee to use our fields, and then there's a fee if they want to use the lights. So they do pay to use the lights. I don't know, Matt could tell you what the fee is, I don't know off the top of my head, but there is a fee for any softball tournament that comes on. For the Merrimack Men's League, there is no fee to use the lights. They have been told, basically when they can turn on the lights. So, I haven't been down there in several years. I stopped playing long ago. The last time I was down there, they were adhering to not turning on the lights before 8 p.m. So they would turn on, and as soon as the games were off, as soon as they have 3 games at Martell. As soon as the third game ended, they gave them 15 minutes to clear out, and they were shutting the lights off, and that was happening.
And we have the women's league, right?
The women, yes, there's leagues on, there's a couple, there's a women's league on Tuesday, and I believe there's a co-ed league on Friday. And they were using the field too, and I don't believe they get charged either.
Correct, yeah, the town-based teams, so it's kind of 80% of the team has to be from town. They don't, the current policy is that they don't pay, and that books most of the fields up, but we do collect from the weekend tournaments, and there's a couple of adult sports leagues that rent it on, like Tuesday nights and things that they pay a fee. But again, you're not gonna cover, our fees are low, honestly, you're not gonna cover that, so
Yeah,
we could potentially make a little bit, but again, there's so much of it that we're giving away for free to the town groups, it's not gonna cover.
Well, I guess at some point, is it time just to say, and I'm not saying make an exorbitant fee, but when you hear about netting that has to be replaced, and that's significant netting at Trudowski Field, which is used by the men's league, that should we just, every 10 years, we know we have to, and I think that was that $50,000?
Yeah, and that includes the poles too.
Yeah, and so, that's coming. So should we maybe increase some fees to start building up, like a capital reserve, so that it doesn't hit us?
I can certainly have the rec committee and I can start working on some recommendations for you guys to think about this spring.
And I'm not saying jump it up a lot, I'm
Yeah.
just saying enough to start, if we have to replace this every 10 years, let's offset that, so.
Finley?
I'm not sure what the tournaments are like now, but they used to bring in a boatload of people visiting the community, and
They do.
I mean, hotel rentals and everything, there was an economic benefit to it. I think it is appropriate to look into it. I do recall back over 20 years ago, when they put the lights in down here at Vice Field, they put the lights on for the first time, and the demand charge is what the problem is. The cost of running the lights isn't that much. I mean, it's a bit, but the biggest charge was if you put them on before 8 o'clock, they hit you with a demand charge. They had to increase their budget, calculate out $500 a month for that demand charge. And so, you know, I don't know if that's taken into account, but it is all something that we probably should take a glance at anyhow.
I can speak a little bit about softball tournaments now. About 2 or 3 years ago, they stopped going to 2-day tournaments. It's only a day, it's a day tournament now, so they're not staying in town. They come in, if they start on a Friday night, they try to get the local teams to play on a Friday night, and then they start crack of dawn, 8 o'clock on Saturday, and play until they're done. And most times they're done Saturday night, depending on what it is, 11 o'clock. Maybe a couple times they went past that, but it's usually around 11.
The lights go off at 10.
10, so yeah, so a couple times maybe 11, a couple tournaments depending on what's going on. So it's not like years ago when you used to bring in 50 teams from all over New England and they'd be staying all over the place. It's no more that way. Even the big regional ones are only one day, like the regional E's are only one day, which is all over the Northeast. So the tournaments have changed in that realm with that.
Okay. You wanted to move on to?
All right.
So,
Sammy.
hold on, Matt. So, I just want to say, what Matt's talking about, he calls it programs. It's not. It's the revolving fund. And in the revolving fund, we have the day camp, the teen camp, the drama camp, swim lessons, tennis lessons, school vacation week, and wildness. We also have some rentals of the function hall that all go into this. And it's a revolving fund, which means that the money turns over. It's not taxpayer-based. It's all based on fees. So the fees cover the cost. So as you'll see, if the $198,000 for day camp, that's there. That is all covered by the registrations for day camp. This is no taxpayer dollars goes towards the day camp. It's all fee-based revenue that is offset. So.
Again, stealing my thunder. So, yeah, basically money comes in, money goes back out to, direct expenses, but with the revolving fund, part of the setup is that the programs that we run, summer camps and things, part of we have to build in a salary allocation for myself and my program coordinator. Paul gives me a number each year, basically how much we have to cover from those programs, which for this coming fiscal year will be $57,524. And so again, what we do is we kind of take our biggest, or 7 or 8 biggest programs, things that we expect to run every year, and figure out what those, what the percentages of the budget, for those programs. So again, Nanticoke Day Camp is our largest program in a year, so it's paying, it's expected to generate 70% of that. Our teen camp, which we started 3 or 4 years ago, is 22%. Drummer Camp's a small program, but those 3 camps combined are 93% of that are expected to cover 93% of that salary allocation. The challenge comes is when we have last summer. We weren't going to be able to cover that whether camp ran or not, just because of the tight restrictions and that kind of thing. I can run 500 programs with independent contractors and schedule every hour of the building in the function hall or in the parks, but I'm not going to be able to cover $250,000 that the camp generates. So last year was a tough year. Obviously, we didn't cover that salary allocation that we're normally expected to, and so obviously the town kind of had to bail us out. But the expectation is that we're supposed to cover that every year.
Could I just?
Yeah.
So it isn't that they weren't able to cover it. Because they weren't running the programs, they weren't using the expenses. The allocation is to reimburse the town for the finance department staff, the town manager staff, human resources, things of that sort. So since they weren't running the programs last year, they weren't using the resources, so it wasn't like the town covered the day camp or the expenses. So I just want to get that out there. It isn't that way. The reason why we have this allocation is to pay for services rendered so that the taxpayers aren't paying for making payroll, making AP, the human resource time to hire people and doing other things related to the revolving fund. The revolving fund pays for what the revolving fund uses. And that's why. Sorry.
That's fine. I was getting there.
Just not fast enough.
That's fine. Anyway, so, you know, we're hoping by the time we get to this summer that things are kind of back to normal, and you know, I want to kind of talk about that a little bit tonight. You know, I sit on the task force for New Hampshire Camp Directors Association, so I kind of represent all the municipalities, both with New Hampshire Camp Directors, but also with DHHS, as we look forward to kind of summer of '21 with COVID-19. And so we've been meeting for a couple of months now, trying to work with them to update the camp regs to something, you know, and again, last summer, groups of 10 was just financially unsustainable for us. Now, at the end of the summer, they changed that for childcare agencies, they changed it to groups of 20. That would have solved 90% of our problems that we were facing last summer. The other big question was masks, although now people have kind of gotten used to masks, and masks aren't really, you know, we did vacation week 2 weeks ago, and not a single kid or parent complained about wearing a mask when we were indoors, you know, so. We've been meeting with them, we've been meeting with DHHS, and the hope was we were supposed to meet with them to get new camp regulations right before Thanksgiving. But the problem was, obviously, numbers started spiking, and they kind of said, okay, we're going to put you on hold, we'll get back to you in January, February timeframe, you know, and then we'll update it, you know. So we're still waiting for those updates for camp to come through for this year. But, you know, again, if they simply do what they've already done for example, childcare and for schools, then camp's going to be much easier to run this year. We're still going to have a lot of the social distancing and masks and those kinds of things that we would have had last summer. But what I want to talk about tonight is that historically we open camp registration now. It's usually this week, usually right after this meeting, when we open registration. And part of the reason we do that is because that's when every other camp opens up. And so my hope is tonight that I can get your blessing to also open camp registration, with the caveat that when the new regulations do officially get released in February or even March, we'll come back, we'll have another conversation and say, here's the final product, this is how we're gonna meet all these guidelines, you know, and kind of get the final okay in March to open. But I'm asking for it now, again, one, because every other camp is going to be opening with it. All the other day camps in the area are going to be opening within the next 2 weeks. And so if we don't open registration until March, parents are going to think we're not running, they're going to go elsewhere, and so we're going to be kind of behind the ball on trying to recruit campers, recruit staff. I did get the permission from the town manager a couple of weeks ago to actually start recruiting for staff, because again, it's the same issue. I can't wait until March because the good people are going to be gone. And so I'm kind of hoping tonight that to kind of get a tentative okay from you folks to at least open registration. You know, we still won't be a 100% go until we have a chance, that you have a chance to open, to review what the final regs are. Now, YMCA Camp Sergeant Rand did run last summer. They had 275 kids a week. They didn't have any problems. Their campus is smaller than ours, and like I said, I get concerned if we're chasing them because they're opening and we're not. You know, the other thing that I think about is, you know, normally we renew our membership for the American Camp Association, which covers our accreditation to be at an accredited camp. That bill usually comes due in November. Because we didn't run camp this summer, we didn't have money to pay them. We've gotten an extension from them through January anyway, but right now I have a bill due from them for, you know, $1,500, but I can't say we're an accredited camp until we've at least upped our fees and, you know, those kinds of things. So again, I'm hoping tonight that you'll give me kind of the tentative okay to open, start taking registration, you know, with the understanding that I'll be back before you in February or March once we get those final regulations, and, you know, kind of how we're going to address, you know, what's in them. But again, we are expecting them to be easier to manage based on, you know, again, the vaccine's out, you know, in theory, at least widespread distribution by May, June timeframe, so, which means, you know, staff are all have the ability to get it if they want it, you know, by the time we open camp this summer.
Sounds like a question. Does anybody have comments on it? Nancy?
I think it's perfectly reasonable. I'm assuming that at registration time, it would be made clear with a caveat depending upon,
Absolutely.
you know, their decision to. And also, so do you need $1,500?
No, he does not. We will buy, we can pay for that.
Well,
You don't need $1,500. He just said that.
Well, that's
Just
what
say
I,
thank you.
that's the bill that I have due.
Just
But
say
if I
thank-
open camper registration, I'll have money coming in to pay it.
Just say thank you.
We can cover $1,500 to pay for
So you don't have to.
for this. There's
you
plenty
don't
of
wanna
money
put that
left
off.
in that revolving
Huh?
fund balance to pay for that.
It's the chicken and the egg, you know? You need that accreditation to be able to.
I guess what we're asking and what Matt's asking for, and I think the council understands, is that tentatively, if we could, if we could open up registrations and at least go ahead and produce it, and with the caveat that it's the final decision of the council, like it was last year, whether or not we're gonna run camp or not, depending on vaccinations and guidelines from the governor's office. I don't think we need a motion, I just need
Just need
kind of
everybody to nod their
consensus,
head
head,
right
head
direction.
bobs, and
I think it's a great
Everybody
idea to
bob
go
their
ahead.
heads.
Do it.
Yeah.
With that caveat that Nancy pointed out,
Yeah.
Do it.
agree.
by all means.
Go ahead.
was in favor of it before, so I still am.
Yeah. I-
Great.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Right, and that's all I have for you tonight.
That's all you have for us?
Until I come back next time, but.
So in the budget book, there's nothing listed in the budget under the revolving fund for 2021. What happened? Didn't we budget anything? Pardon? Didn't get a page. This,
Yeah, it's the last step.
I mean, it is here, but under budget for 2021, it's completely blank. I was just,
because it's a revolving fund, and because of what happened,
but we budgeted. This was
Yeah.
done back in January of
Right.
last year, right? So there was a
Right.
budget.
There was a budget, but since, when, I could put one in. We do have one from last year. I could put it in. It's basically, I'll put one in and I'll let you know. I'll give you a new sheet, okay?
Well, I was just, it just struck me as curious that it was
Because it's a
blank.
revolving, is that why?
It was because it was revolving fund. It's, technically, yes, you budgeted during the budget season, but once you said no to day camp, there was no budget. The budget got zeroed out
For that revolving.
for that revolving fund.
Because we didn't use.
because you
any-
didn't
Camp
use it.
trek and theater camp and
Yeah.
swimming lessons and tennis lessons and
Yeah,
all that stuff.
none of that went
stuff-
on, so
None of that
because,
stuff happened this past year?
no. So once you said no, back in March or April, whenever we made the final decision, the budget really was zero, but we did, during the budget process, have a budget, and I can make those changes and give you the page.
It's a revolving, it's a self-funded thing, so it's not like
Correct,
we saved or didn't save money, but
correct.
just for reference, so you can see what has been done in the past and whatnot to understand.
We'll make that change.
Thank you, sir. So, day camp looks like it's going up from actual and things of that nature. You comfortable with, with the numbers that were put together here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate everything.
You do an awesome job. We really appreciate your excitement and enthusiasm, whether you're listening or not.
And last but not least.
Sorry to keep you guys so long. Thanks for being here.
Matt took us that long, kept us that long.
Huh?
Matt took us that long. It's very.
So, first budget we'd like to talk about in the police department is their communication or dispatch 05. Besides the, this is, majority of this has a 2% raise in the wages due to union contracts for the dispatchers and some of the office staff. It also includes the 53rd week. It includes the retirement benefit increase, and the one major increase in this department that you'll see is in line 0105 8334, and that's going up $20,756. And the major increase for that is because of the RMS maintenance for our new records management system. It's going to be about $35,000 just for the maintenance fees for that new system that is being implemented. And the chief can answer any questions you may have on that or anything else related to dispatch communications.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the town council, thank you for having me here. If it pleases the town council, I'll go through the significant increases, and if you guys have any other questions about the rest of the budget, feel free to ask. So, I'm gonna start off with what town manager McCallie brought up, is that 8334 line, the maintenance office equipment. So currently, we have a very outdated record management system, as you are all aware. There's money in the CIP to actually purchase a new program. We haven't committed to anything yet, but we are pretty much 99% there with this company. And, you know, based on the product they have, the service fees, the annual fee is gonna be considerably higher than the old program we have right now. Right, currently, we pay about $14,000 in annual maintenance fees. The maintenance fees for this program for police and fire, so both of us, will be $35,000. So that's a significant increase, but it's something that we need to get, as Councilman Albert can attest to, that our RMS system needs to change quickly. So, you know, we're almost there, so.
So 35,000 for the combined fire and police?
Police and fire, yes.
But it's all in your budget?
Yes,
That's
so
what you
it's,
said, 833.
that's one thing that we could probably work on, shift around. I can itemize what the fire side is, but it's basically a package deal. So if that's something that the town council would like to do, is shift it some in their budget as well, I think we can work through that.
So just, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
just
no, no,
for
absolutely.
mine and the public's benefit, can you tell us what we're saving by going to this system versus staying with the old system? I mean, for that much additional maintenance expense, and presumably there's an expense to buy this product,
Correct.
what is it bringing to the police and fire departments? And is there
Without getting into the specifics, obviously we haven't signed a contract, but we want to be able to interface with the state on driver's licenses, e-ticket, the court systems. Our current system can't do that because the way the state built the system was kind of proprietary. You either had one product or you were considered out. So we were very early on in getting a computerized record management system. Unfortunately, we haven't really progressed to keep up with the times. So basically, usability, the ease of being more stat-driven, be able to generate better reports, better documentation. They have built-in programs where you can't have duplicate names, can't have duplicate addresses, which we currently have in our system right now. So ease of use and better reports and better reporting out to the states for NIBRs and NIFRs. So it's like I said, the program we have right now is old GUI-based. I'm not a software guy, but GUI-based client, and this is more, it's gonna be cloud-based. It's much more modern and user-friendly. So hope that explains
How
it.
does the fire use it?
So right now, Firehouse,
Firehouse.
now I'm not sure, I don't want to speak for Chief Duke, but Firehouse will be end-of-lifing soon, so. So that's why they were really eager to get on board as well. And the problem right now that we have is that we're on two different platforms. We're Microsystems Crime Track, they're Firehouse, which is made by a different company. So every time there's a fire call, our dispatcher has to generate what's called a run sheet. They send it down to a shared folder down there. They then take the document, they'll type in what engine went in, what time they responded, what time they cleared. So it's really duplicitous. This is gonna be all interface. And like I said, without getting a name in the company, the program's gonna allow them to dispatch themselves, so they'll be able to touch something on MDT, similar to us, on scene, en route. So really make it much more efficient and less tie up communication lines.
Peter?
Yeah, just, I want to chime in with what the chief's saying. Right now, our dispatchers, oh, I'm sorry. I'm the one that complained about it.
Yeah, you were.
You know, our dispatchers are duplicating effort. They have to
Yeah,
do a run.
makes
They're getting
sense, though.
questioned by the fire department, the police department on the accuracy of their information. The other thing is, and believe me, I looked and I saw 35,000 a year, but I guess I have to look at it this way. We're using Crime Track still. This is a defunct program that's, what are we, 20, 25 years old?
I think it's gonna be about 22.
Yeah, and
Computer terms.
so the money we've saved by not using anything else, we have to at this point, we have to do it, at least in my opinion and experience, we have to do this. And then the interoperability between not only police and fire, but the state, it's all important. And then you gotta remember the information that a police department keeps, whether it's legal information, police reports, things that are gonna get used in criminal cases and so forth, things that people need in their cases, if the police department intervenes in a situation and they needed documentation, it's all gonna be, it's gonna be more efficient and better. It's gonna help when people come in for a request for information, they'll be able to access it and get it quicker for the citizen. So I see a lot of upside to this, so I'm certainly in favor of this.
I'm not opposed. What I'm trying to understand is if we're suddenly submitting this much money, are we saving something, either overtime or just major stress or, you know, efficiencies? that you talked about?
Efficiencies, ease of work, and accurate reporting. Right now, I don't feel like we're close to reporting for stat-wise. That's one of the deficiencies I see in the current program, where it's not taking the true number of calls of service sometimes, so you have to sort of work around that. I can say that the company that we're using right now, customer service, has been great, and they were originally started off as like an audit company for financials. But it's just time to move on. We did have a records management committee set up. We looked at different products. I can tell you that one product came in, you couldn't even buy the software. It was a yearly subscription fee for 4 years, or five years, and it was $118,000 per year. So, and a lot of companies are shifting to that subscription base where they lock you in for a 6-year contract rather than just buying the product and then having an annual maintenance fee. So,
I fully understand that kind of stuff, working for an electronics company, doing semiconductor designs. We lease software for millions of dollars a year. So I understand that there are those expenses, you can't necessarily buy them. I'm trying to understand if we are using our current system and having to pay, you know, 20% of a dispatcher's time to put in dispatch reports, and now we're not gonna have to do that. Are we putting off having to hire an additional dispatcher? Are we saving somewhere, or we just think this is a much better system and we ought to go spend the money and get it?
without seeing it fully in effect, I'm not sure what's gonna have effect on man hours. I can tell you it will shorten their time entering calls, because it populates over across the fields. It's gonna shorten the officers' time, their inattention in the field, because they're gonna be able to scan license. It's automatically gonna populate for the call of service. The traffic summons, traffic warning, accidents, it's all gonna be like generated through the spot system where it populates and automatically, you know, loads into the system that way. To speak about an exact time frame, I'm not sure what time they were gonna save. But bottom line, it also finally gonna give us ability to give a professional product out there. It's, our police reports, our officers do a great job. Just the way they look sometimes, it just doesn't look like a professional project. I mean, it wasn't until recently we stopped using a dot matrix printer for court complaints. And I'm not even joking. I mean, it's just more of a professional product.
Yep. And presumably, if they're spending less time filling out reports or doing this kind of stuff, they're having more time to be spending attending to the public
Correct.
and/or the situations around them and stuff like that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Finley?
The management, the records management system that the fire department uses, do you know what the cost is associated with that, the annual fee or what have you? Because if you put, right now, it's an additional 21,000, so the difference might be something that would be more easy to embrace, more easily embraced.
We'll get that, we'll get that answer for you. It's not coming up readily right now on my system, but I'll get that answer for the council.
Excellent, thanks.
That's a great point, though.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Chief, to your first budget meeting.
I know, I missed last year because
Nobody said that, so welcome to your first
I
budget
missed
meeting.
last year. I wish I could have been there last year.
Yes.
But
I harassed him before we started.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to see you haven't lost sight of that fact. I appreciate it. As it relates to the RMS, assuming the council approves it, assuming the voters approve it, how long would it take to, purchasing's gonna take time, I understand that, but when you actually get the product, how long is it gonna take to install, be able to sync between police and fire? And is there any education or training that's gonna be required for the people that are gonna be using that system, both the officers in the field and the people that are employees in the office?
Yep, so when I bring before the RMS actual purchase, before you guys, to remove the money out of CIP, you're gonna see that it has training lines in it as well, so they're gonna provide training to us. Like I said, they're estimating maybe summer, early fall, so which is pretty quick turnaround for a large project. So that's where hopeful, because they're building out in New Hampshire right now, so other departments are getting the interface with the state, so technically the more they do, the more seamless it's gonna be. So hopefully they're saying late summer, early fall.
Okay, and that's fully operational, everybody onboarded, trained, and?
Correct.
Perfect, okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
a
Chairman.
bizarre word to use.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
It was, okay.
Peter?
Chief, I'm looking at, the police department pays $2,000 fee for spots, right? Is the department still, one of the departments in the state that's authorized to do criminal record checks and so forth?
Correct.
Okay. And we don't get any money back from the state on that, correct?
No, pardon, we don't do it for the public, they have to go through state police.
Okay.
We do it for our arrestees and our applicants that apply to the police department.
But I know for a while, like, we had teachers coming in and we were doing fingerprinting and everything for them, and we still do it to some extent. And we pay, general government pays $12,000 for criminal record checks for employees. Will this new software, since we're gonna be interacting with the state, is there a way that maybe you could look into them and say, whereas we do this for you, basically, and now we're linked in with you, is there some way we can circumvent that fee?
No, because CJIS requirements require anything that's printed out at the police department regarding criminal histories, motor vehicles, has to stay at the police department. We don't even send it out for discovery, they have to go through the state for that.
All right, thank you.
We tried, good.
I mean, great angle.
I tried to build a bridge.
Any more questions on the RMS?
No, I guess not.
So moving down to 8352, education and training. You're gonna see an increase of $2,000 for training for dispatchers and seminars. This is because the certification that they have, the APCO certification, which is Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, they require 24 hours of annual training now. Basically, they adjusted it, so I assume because they want to make a little more money as well, so they have to do 24 hours of training, which we're fine with, but something that we didn't budget before. I mean, the more training, the better. You're gonna hear me during the police budget talk about training as well. So $2,000 thought was a reasonable increase. And that's the major increases for communications budget.
Quick question. Mr.
Go ahead.
Is that training online or in person?
Well, before COVID, it was in person.
Right.
They have since done online as well.
And do you imagine they're gonna follow that protocol moving forward, or?
Can't speak to the
Can't
future,
speak
but.
to the future. Fair
So,
enough.
we've done pretty well. Obviously, a challenge this year was getting the officers all the training they needed. So there were a lot of online platforms that opened up. But sometimes some fields, especially when you deal with more of the police officer side of things, face-to-face interactive training is much more beneficial than online training. But we have been doing a mix of it, obviously.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'm just curious, when it comes to the trainings for dispatchers.
Correct.
Why, once you know the business, what is gained in training? I mean, if, your ability to, use your revolver, whatever, your weapon, that training I understand, but what more does this bring to the table each year?
I think each and every year, both sides of the house, the operations side and dispatch and communications, you learn from past incidents. So a lot of times you talk about these things, or they might be, they might train in a situation where they don't usually see it here. De-escalation on the phone, a lot of times they're talking about that stuff, so.
Great. Nope, made sense right there.
Okay, great. Any other questions on communications? It's pretty straightforward. Thanks for your inputs.
So, 04 Police is next.
Police?
Once again, you'll see the normal increases for wages and, this is, we have two unions in the police department one's for supervisors and one's for the patrolmen. They are scheduled for a 2% increase in the budget, through the contract that was approved last year and the prior year. Retirement went up for the police officers. Our contribution to retirement went up, as well. They had some other increases. A proposed position that is in the police budget is for the conservation officer. That's a part-time officer for 20 hours a week. And the chief can expand upon that if you'd like a little bit. And basically there is that there needs to be some communications with the Conservation Commission. This is just for paying the salary of this position. This doesn't include any uniforms, vehicles, things he might need to be out in the trails and the woods and things of that sort. So there's a decrease in operating supplies of about $15,000. This year, there's been some vacancies in the police department, and we could get a better deal if we were able to buy ammunition, 2 years' worth of ammunition at once. We were able to secure some better discounts, and we decided to move ahead with that. So by doing that, there was some savings. We took some money out of next year's budget because we have 2 years of ammunition there. I did notice going through this, I wish I would have caught it earlier, they do not have any money. $10,100 is not for telephones. That's actually for,
That's my question.
for dues. And as you'll see, there's a zero in the dues line, so the 10,100 should be in the dues line. And that's roughly about a $3,000 increase, and the chief will explain that to you. And then the other one is that I would want to talk about is vehicles. The vehicle expense went down $19,500 last year. This budget, we ended up buying 4 vehicles because we were in that 3-3-4 cycle. We dropped down to 3 vehicles again for the police department. So there's some savings there of $19,500 in the vehicle line. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chief, and he can give more detail.
Thank you. So if we want to move down to 8111 overtime, increase of $10,000 in overtime. This is going to be to provide funding for our officers to attend training. During the civil unrest and death of George Floyd, the New Hampshire formed the Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that document, but they've made several recommendations that all police departments should follow. It's a tiered approach for training. They're requiring, currently we need 8 hours a year. Personally, I don't think that's enough of training for our police officers. But by 2024, everyone has to be doing 24 hours of training annually. I would like to start that starting this year as well. If they made the recommendation, they think it's important enough to put it in a document, I think we should start doing 24 hours training annually. A lot of officers do get that, but I want to make sure it happens for every officer there. So that's why they increased it $10,000.
What kind of training is that again?
It can be any kind of training, but they also made specific training requests regarding implicit bias and de-escalation techniques, several things that we were already trained in as well.
Okay. Well, we have been doing some training. You're just wanting to bump it up to 24 hours.
So I would like to bump up the overtime line to backfill the officers attending like week-long trainings and such. We try to do it best we can with making sure not booking so many officers during the same time period, so we can cut down the overtime costs. But with knowing that there's going to be more increased training, just a little extra money to backfill those officers.
Barbara?
So is there other duplicate training that the officers get every year that maybe you could back off a little bit in order to be able to put in this new training for de-escalation, et cetera, without having to go into an overtime situation?
No, because the annual training that we do is the annual training that's required by Police Standard and Training Council. The de-escalation training and implicit bias training are the only 2 that they specifically mentioned during the Law Enforcement Commission on Accountability. There's a plethora of training out there, and a lot of the training that Police Standards and Training Council supplies right now, which is free other than sending an officer up there on our time, just isn't professional. It's not really up to speed, and there's a lot of other programs that might be a week long that really get into the roots of some of the issues that we're dealing with. You know, maybe it be, you know, we just send people to de-escalation training and also excited delirium training, where you deal with these situations where people are having a mental break and there's nothing really you can do to control them. So they deal with techniques like that. So there's a lot more professional organizations out there that are conducting these trainings. So that's where we like to try to work and send them to.
Excuse me.
Nancy?
You wanna wrestle? So really, it has to do with choosing a more qualified type of training that you think is in response to what's been happening over the year.
Correct, and that's a lot of training in-house as well. We're really gonna be focusing on, situation-based training, where we're gonna run officers, which we've already started doing, running officers through some of the situations that we faced here in town, to make sure that they're gonna be handling it the right way. I'm very confident in everyone's ability as a police department, but you only get better the more you train, and less likely you make mistakes.
And I think, I'll just make a commentary. I think we've been very lucky here in Merrimack, but we also can't deny that we need to be prepared and for something that we hope we'll never have to deal with. But we can't deny that that's something we should get a hold of and at least prepare for, justifiably so.
I absolutely agree. And New Hampshire overall has been very fortunate. I think we're a very educated police officer, well-trained, but we're one situation away from having a bad situation come out of it, right?
And in reality, bias should be examined. And those kinds of de-escalating techniques should be done, regardless of what's going on.
Correct. And I truly believe in implicit bias, and it's almost, I wish the general public could also be trained in it.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes they don't
All of
understand
us.
we're not responding to their calls because of a suspicious person, when in reality, there's nothing suspicious about it. And we don't handle those calls.
And I think part of that has to do with communication that needs to be done to the public, too.
Absolutely.
Peter?
Thank you.
Yeah, Chief, I'm very happy to see this. And, you know, one of the things I think, and I can speak from my experience, is the police academy provides free training for our police officers. But here's the thing, having been there and done that, about 10 years in, maybe even less, 7 years in, you've pretty much taken every class the academy can give you. But you're in a career for 20 years. So you need these folks to have alternative training. And don't get me wrong, the folks at the academy do a great job. So, I mean, I'm certainly in support of this, especially in light of current events, as the chief has said. The department's been proactive on these issues, so I think it's important, and I'm glad to see it, so.
Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, I'm just gonna jump on down the training line then, since we're already talking about it, if you don't mind, and we'll circle back to the conservation officer. So, 8352, education and training, job-related training seminars, an increase of $5,000 for the same reason I mentioned before. And that's for different courses that are offered outside of Police Standards and Training Council. Okay. All right, so back up to the conservation officer.
Actually, Chief, if I
What
could.
line is that, Chief?
I'm just, so you don't have to come back to it. I'm just curious, how much, the total increases, we've gone through a few. Do you know offhand your total increases on our training budget?
So with the $5,000 in overtime, $5,000 in training, a total of $10,000 for the police side of things.
Of
Increase.
all the increases, the combined increases, that's what it is?
For training,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
So 10K in overtime and 5K in training.
Pardon, yes, so 15.
Education, training costs, so 15,000.
15.
Yes. All right, conservation officers. It's placed under, place held under the 8136. It's just a general line.
Say what?
It's placed under 8136. It's just a general line. It has no account number signed to it.
Way at the bottom.
Right at the bottom, you know, I see it, yeah.
So we recognize the fact that, you know, especially with the recent COVID situations where our parks were being overrun, conservation areas were being used quite a bit. We recognize the fact that, you know, we have 1,600 acres that's the Conservation Commission controls. And simply, we could do a better job of enforcement and education out there. And by having a part-time conservation officer, it might assist that. As Assistant Town Manager McCallie mentioned, there's gonna be a lot of future discussion with the Conservation Commission, but this is just to get the conversation going. This is based on our 20-hour work week at at 30-36 an hour, which is a 30-month step. This would be a certified police officer. He would have enforcement powers to enforce conservation laws, other laws, and also make laws of arrest as well.
Peter?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this because I spoke with the town manager and Paul about this, and being on the Conservation Commission, this was somewhat of my idea. And listening to being on the Conservation for the past year, their concerns are violations occurring in their property, which in light of this year, I agree with, but, and I'm kinda gonna do a little bit of an about face on this, only because I'm concerned about the increases in the municipal tax rate. And I'm seeing, look at the fire department asking for 4 firefighters. I am seeing a lot of things, and don't get me wrong, this position is needed, but I'm just wondering if we should revisit it a year from now, only because of the increases we're seeing. And Paul, you mentioned something that this doesn't include the vehicle or any equipment or anything. So, to me, that's just more added expense. So, I'm, at this point, if I hadn't looked at the budget the way it was municipally, I'm just reticent. And I appreciate, Chief, you and the town manager taking the time, because I do believe it is time to do this. But I think that this might be one area where we can sacrifice for a year, and certainly look at it again next year, because it is needed. And we did have a meeting with the Conservation Commission. Before this, I ran it before them, and they were, I would describe it as ambivalent about it at best. They did like it, but there was some ambivalence, and now we've agreed to fund the whole salary. And I think that was and I don't want to mischaracterize that, because but there was a concern of where the salary's gonna come from, whether they're gonna have to pull it constantly out of their line and eventually eat up their funds. So, I'm trying to characterize it as best
Their $1
as
million
possible.
fund?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
As we all roll our eyes.
But, and I don't wanna mischaracterize it, because those are hardworking folks there, and they're taking
They
care of a
are.
lot of property. But, and I do appreciate this, but having had a chance to think about it, having seen the other budgets, this is one area, and again, this was my idea, and I thank it, and I thank the chief and the town manager for bringing it forward. And I'd say let's consider it next year. Thanks.
Barbara?
Yeah, I have some concerns about this position, because it's not only however many hours a week this is. This is also some kind of vehicle. How's this guy gonna get around the trails? Walk? I don't think so. Or even a bike. You can't ride a bike through Wildcat Falls. So it's not only the position, it's everything else around it, including training. So it's gonna be a lot more than 34,600, for sure. And if the Conservation Committee wants to pick that up, well, that's another thing, but still, the money is gonna come from the taxpayer ultimately.
Finley?
Well, when Peter brought this up at our goal-setting meeting, I thought it was a great idea, because I'm really tired of hearing that we can't do anything about the Sklar property, about Greater Woods, all these places. As far as vehicles go, we have a pickup truck, and there's no reason that they can't use that, because I was told that it's pretty much a supervisory vehicle, occasional use, and I don't know if that's true. I was gonna ask you that when we got to vehicles. But, we have a vehicle. I believe we had maybe 2 four-wheelers, but we had at least one. We do have 2. So I don't think that those costs, they're already in. We own those. There's gonna be maintenance and fuel and so on, but, I would, with a four-wheeler.
I can't get down some of those trails.
Oh, well, but I'm just saying, I would rather, so I think the cost of 35,000 is probably pretty appropriate, and I'd much prefer, because I think this is important. When you brought it up, I was totally on board. I'd rather pull 2,000 here, 2,000 there, elsewhere from the budget, and keep this position in. But when we get to that point in our discussions, I suppose we can try and tackle it at that point.
Nancy?
I'm just curious, are you aware of any other towns that have conservation offices for this purpose?
Correct. Londonderry was the first town in New Hampshire to have one. It was a gentleman that retired from the Londonderry Police Department. But there was a large partnership with the Conservation Commission in getting up and going, funding the equipment, funding the vehicles, funding that. And that's something that I've provided to the town manager before. So there's definitely a lot more work would have to go into this, as I indicated before. It's a partnership. And, you know, and I can appreciate that we have the four-wheelers, but those are still for a police function. The supervisor's vehicle, we can't have it out there being used by someone else when there's a lieutenant supposed to be driving it. And that's how we get in trouble with high mileage on cars and such. So I would think that he would need his own vehicle and his own equipment.
Okay, so have you spoken, has it been an effective position in Londonderry? I guess I want to be able to get a history of effectiveness.
So I have spoken, it's still pretty primitive. And during COVID times, there was some laxing of the number of hours a part-time officer can work. So I think he's been tasked with doing a lot of other things as well. So I think the answer that they gave me, that come back and see us in a year and we'll give you some numbers, basically. But it has been effective. And they also have a large, they have a large amount of conservation land out there too.
As well.
Can I jump in, Tom? Or
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and again, I mean, I'm going against what I originally wanted. And I agree, thanks Finley, I do agree that we need it, but I think that there's some things too, that we need to discuss, and the chief, and they need to iron out as far as what type of uniform does this, if we give this individual maybe from the town a used pickup truck, do we put blue lights on it, what do we put on it? There's a lot of the smaller stuff to iron out, but an officer can get through all of our parks on a four-wheeler or a bicycle. I drive through Wildcat Falls on my bicycle several times. Again, it's just, to me, the concern is the budget this year. I think it might behoove us to wait one more year and then discuss it. That's all I'm saying. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments on the conservation officer at this point? Questions? Okay.
All right, moving on, 8203, as Assistant Town Manager McCallie mentioned, there was a $15,000 savings in purchases this year that we removed the budget from next year. Small change in the uniforms where we decreased the number of bulletproof vests. Because we're on a cycle, we keep track of every 5 years, need to buy new ones, so we decrease that slightly.
Wait, what line are you talking about?
On uniforms at 8204, ballistic vests, there was a slight decrease there.
It looks like an increase to me. What am I missing?
Because,
53,450 is what's in there?
oh, I'm just talking about the specific line itself.
Oh, which one? I'm sorry.
Ballistic vests.
Oh.
We decreased the number of officers we need to purchase for.
Well, I don't see that kind of detail. So there's still a $4,000 or $5,000 increase in that line.
I believe that's because the number of union officers we have that are entitled to closing allowance. We increased the number of officers we had in our staff. You were generous enough to give us a full year position as well as a half. And if I'm mistaken, that includes all the specialty pay as well. So that's where the increase is.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so if we move down to 8270, dues and fees. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
I'm looking on the budget and I just see third line down in 8204, no special duty. I'm trying to understand what that means.
So that means they haven't joined a unit where they get an extra amount for the clothing allowance based on contractual needs. So they didn't join the bike squad, they didn't join the
Okay,
ATV.
so you just spelled that out, so it's
Yeah, we provide the numbers to,
they get the basic uniform allowance.
correct.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Now I get it, thanks.
So 8270, dues and fees. The first big change is Leads Online. That was moved from 8334 to make it more reflective of where it belongs. Leads Online is our ability to search pond databases across the whole U.S. and specifically New Hampshire and New England. It helps us greatly in criminal investigations because usually if someone steals something, they're looking to sell it. And the actual cost for that was $2,300. I believe it was previously listed for $400. And the next change is the dues and fees to the rape aggression defense instructor. That's for 2 instructors and 2 aggressors to be certified by the RAD program. Any questions on those?
No, I can live with 300. Go ahead.
How many classes do these instructors put on, Chief?
I
What's
want
the
to say
question? I didn't hear your question. Sorry.
How many classes have these instructors put on?
Well, pre-COVID, I think they did upwards to 10.
Good.
Yeah, and last year they actually started integrating with the high school as well, so.
Yeah. Post-COVID, I'd love to see them even do more.
You know, it's a program that we've developed, and we're very fortunate to have the structures that we do. It's intense. It's pretty, the aggressors are very, very tired by the end of it. So that's just to maintain their certification to be able to do those programs.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if we move on to 8334, maintenance office equipment. $4,000 increase for the program called Power DMS. I know I've spoken to you guys before regarding that program. That's a electronic program that's gonna house all of our standard operating procedures, general orders, training, publications, updated forms and such. We're sharing that with the fire department, and the total cost is $8,000, so it's $4,000 less than $4,000 for them. And that sort of goes more in line with, you know, again, the Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability. They really are pushing towards accreditation for every department in the state, which is very costly. This is a program that's used by CALEA and associated with CALEA, which is the accreditation for law enforcement. So it's getting us more of a professional standard.
In a minute, Barbara, the laptops for patrol vehicles, we get new laptops when we get new vehicles, or what?
So we cycle them out, but after a couple of years, they start obviously getting wear and tear, and might have to buy 1 or 2 if that's the case. But every time we change over a cruiser, we try to use almost all the equipment possible so the town doesn't incur any other costs.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's funny how Ford just keeps on changing the dimensions of the car just slightly to make us buy new stuff, however. But we try to be as responsible as possible.
Okay, Barbara?
Yeah, that was the same question I had, because we just bought laptops last year, too, so.
Yeah, so I think we end up buying them, pretty much buying them.
I want to say, don't quote me on this, but the cost and they're ruggedized, military grade typically, and I want to believe the cost is like almost $3,800 per laptop. So
Okay, that was my next question.
so-
How many laptops are we buying here?
so hopefully none. I'll be honest with you. Hopefully we don't have any that break or fail. So it's more of a placeholder in case we do. That way we can replace it with another one.
And a car lasts 3 years, is on a 3-year cycle, is that right, or?
So we purchase on a 3-3-4 cycle.
Right, so you replace them every 3 years.
Right, we're still trying to catch up from a while ago when we lost cars. These last cars we pulled off the line, which are getting outfitted now. There's also a problem with Ford keeping up production as well, but they came off with 138,000 miles on it. So that's pretty rough. Most of the admin vehicles up top are over 100,000 as well. So we're seeing the life of these cars, and we're taking care of them. They're still running, but typically it's about 3 years.
Paul?
I'd like to go back to the laptop. That is not just the purchase of the laptop, that $5,000. For instance, we had 2 laptops that we had to bring back to the manufacturer because it was failing to connect to Wi-Fi. So that's also their cost to troubleshoot and fix them. One we got for free because they didn't know why it was doing it. They couldn't figure it out. So they fixed that one for free, but we had another one that cost us to fix. And the company's out of, in Massachusetts.
Correct.
So that's also the price for maintenance on those laptops.
Okay, so there's a maintenance program built into this cost as well?
Yes, of that $5,000. It's just not $5,000 for a new laptop. It's for the maintenance. If the Wi-Fi stops connecting, we have to get it serviced. We have to pay for that.
And they're more like tablets that have detachable keyboards, not like a laptop like this, so the general public knows it's a ruggedized thing.
Right. Okay. Do you have a question for them?
Not on the computers, I'm down a little bit on the dog insurance, the canine insurance.
Sure, we also.
What is that?
What number is that?
So
I'm sorry.
8460, the next increase. We've always had canine insurance for our canine. As you know, our canine's a very expensive commodity that we have, and we want to make sure that it's insured in case, God forbid, that anything does happen.
Okay,
So that way, if there's certain costs, I don't know the exact plan, but you spend so much money in veterinary bills, then they cover the rest. So if there's any issue with the dog.
It's not insurance for liability, it's insurance for the dog.
and that's what, right, because that's what I was thinking, and I thought it should be covered under.
No, it's insurance for the canine
Right,
itself.
so if it's major surgery, then.
Yep.
And we try because the people of Merrimack love the dog, and they'll do the magic show and things of that sort, so they'll get a lot of donations. So we try to offset some of that with some of those donations as well, some of the expenses of the canine with some of those donations we get, so.
Does he still get the fluff and dry or whatever it was?
No, he didn't get that.
No.
What's, the new dog didn't get that. It was only for Gunny. They loved Gunny for some reason to give him the fluff and dry.
Dre's doing very well, though.
Perfect,
So,
very good.
yeah, he's doing well. And the last item for a change is the patrol vehicles. It's purchasing 3 patrol vehicles.
No
Three and not
trucks?
4 like the line implies.
There will not be a single truck purchased this year, Councilman.
Sorry.
Does it say 4?
I was expecting it.
You were expecting it.
Mine says, because you just changed it.
Supposed to be 3, I made the correction.
Peter, go ahead.
Okay. Chief, the vehicle costs we're looking at, does that include upfit?
There's some costs associated with it.
Okay. So, but that price for each vehicle includes the cost of the vehicle and the upfit, or is that a separate line?
We're trying to include.
It's some cost. We have to predict what the cost is going to be of the cruiser, and it's a rough estimate. And depending on the production year of the vehicle, a lot of times it's a lot cheaper. This year happened to be a higher one, so hopefully next year we'll be able to transfer all the equipment over at a cheaper rate.
Now, I see you put in for 4 vehicles. I thought somewhere down the line, I thought I was told.
Three, that's
it was-
Correct.
That's a
It's 3.
misprint.
It's supposed to be 3.
Oh, it is 3.
It's only
okay,
3
'cause I'm
vehicles,
looking at
correct.
All right, thank you then.
Yep.
That just saved me a lot of talk. All right. Thank you.
So last year, we budgeted 30,000 a vehicle. This year, we're only getting a $20,000 savings. Is there $10,000 going somewhere, or that's the increase in cost of the vehicles?
Increase in anticipated cost for the vehicles. I think they all went up approximately $3,000. 33.5, correct.
Is that what he said in here?
I,
Well, yeah.
Tom, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
All right, and the maintenance, under 8332, Chief, I'm looking at, it caught my eye, we hadn't got to it yet. I see crime scene vehicle replacement upfit, and I'm seeing a number here of 38,000. Is that just for that, or is it, what price figures into that line, along with the maintenance and tires? So how much of it is the crime
So the
scene?
actual line item for the crime scene vehicle replacement outfit is zeroed out because we did that last year.
Okay.
So that's for general maintenance, which the assistant town manager, McCallie, will
Okay,
transfer to the highway department to pay for our services and such.
All right, thank you.
Nancy?
I'm just curious, do you have any vacancies right now?
Yes, we do. And hopefully we can fill them and be full staff for at least a year. We have a conditional offer out for 1 employment, so right now it's 2 vacancies. Patrolman, correct.
And we're hoping to have those all filled soon, I believe.
It would be great if we can get 2 more to go into the April Academy and actually be full staff for once.
So we would get these guys in, and then they'd be gone for 3 months or something to the academy, or?
Correct. We do a pre-academy with them for about a month, and then they go off to the academy for 16 weeks.
16 weeks.
Yeah, but right now we have a recruit in the academy, and he's doing virtual for the first 8 weeks, sitting in our interview room, watching a tablet for 8 hours a day.
You guys are cruel.
He's still doing well. He shows up every day, so.
So how many are actually going to be going to the police academy? If you hire the 2, that would be 2. How many others are there?
Nancy?
Microphone.
How many
Thank you.
others would be going aside from this?
So right now, we're down 2 vacancies.
Correct.
So if they are not certified officers, they would have to go to the full-time police academy. So it could be up to 2. We do have a conditional offer out for a certified officer. It's not done yet, but it's promising. But so
So-
ideally, they'd be gone, if it's a brand-new hire, no police experience, they're gone for 16 weeks at the academy.
Okay, so all of the patrolmen that we presently have already been through the academy.
Correct, that's a requirement to work. And if they don't get in a certain time frame because of where they were hired, we have to file an extension with this Police Standard Training Council. So it's a requirement that they have to be certified full-time.
Very good.
We
Thank
we
you.
have one that's in the academy right now, though, Nancy.
Oh, okay, so there, because I know you've had a lot of new patrolmen.
We've had a lot of new patrolmen.
You really have, and
Yes.
so I was curious what the status was of active available to you versus still in training.
So right
That's all.
now, if we count that are available right now that not in the academy, we're at 41,
And your
yes, 41.
capacity is?
44.
Okay, so 3. So you got the 2 and the 1 that's already in. Okay, thank you.
You might have to get a higher test fishing line if you want to keep asking questions. You know, Sorry, go ahead.
That's all I have for increases.
You have another question? Barbara, you want to go first?
Yeah, this is on 8504, computer equipment. Is that like replacement emergency?
No, we work with the IT department in determining which computers we replace every year. We still have a lot of older computers that need to be swapped out that should be replaced. So we work with them and they recommend which computer should be replaced. And it also covers for, repairs and such.
Do they ever consider rebuilding a computer, like swapping out the hard drive?
Yes.
I think they often do.
Okay.
Yes, the reason why some of these computers are so old is because they've been taken from other departments and rebuilt. So for instance, if general government gets a new computer, they'll take the box, they'll take it downstairs, they'll wipe the box, they'll look at it and see what they need, they'll fix it up. Police needs a computer, and these are just computers for office. This does not, these aren't the cars, this is just for the office. Like if the patrol, the squad room needs a computer, they'll take one of the computers that they've rebuilt, bring it downstairs and put it in and look at it that way. So yes, they do look at reusing computers when they can.
Peter?
Chief, I see in the flow chart, we've still got a 2-man SIU unit?
Correct.
Okay. And at any point, it was not we weren't looking at 3, were we, or is it, you had a
It was
rotator or
originally
something?
requested at 3.
Yeah, it was originally requested that, and we might revisit it down the road, but I think we need to be full staff before we ask for any more
Absolutely.
personnel changes.
What's in that SIU?
Special Investigation Unit for,
Thank you.
I think, don't mean
Yes,
to be answering.
You got it
for
right, Special Investigation Unit.
They were brought in to deal with drug situations and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the chief relative to the police budget? Seeing none.
One more to go.
One more to go? What? What's
Other
up?
special revenue tab, it's
Oh.
for the police outside detail.
Police detail.
I just want to say, the very end, it did go up around $50,000. The majority of that cost, we did not increase the number of hours. The majority of that cost is for the wage increase and the retirement increase. This is the fee that we charge to whoever asks for a police detail. This is 100% reimbursed to the town of Merrimack. Fee, that's why it's an other outside revenue. It's 100% self-supporting fee that is charged off to the person who requests the outside detail. There's an administrative fee for my department, town manager, like we see in other departments, for processing the payroll, dealing with the town manager, any legal ramifications, things of that sort that come up. So, but this is no increase in hours, it's just an increase due to salaries and retirement cost. And we charge off that administrative fee to the person getting the detail. We're allowed to charge 5% administration fee. So that gets reimbursed even from the outside services as well.
So that number increase this year is just our guess as to where things are gonna go, or?
The hours has been always discussed with the police department. That's what they believe that they would get for calls.
It's typical. I don't think we've ever exceeded the number.
No,
One year we came close and we had to just pick and choose what we were doing. And that's something we work with the finance department.
Okay, but this is work on streets, different projects in town where they need somebody's help because they're working on lines or?
Correct. Per highway guidelines, DPW guidelines, there's certain roads in town that require a uniformed police officer, the busier roads in town. So if you see the construction jobs, those are officers that are working on their off time, working details. It might be also, during the holidays, we have details at the mall where they contract out with us to provide services to them.
So this is officers working off-duty, are they paid overtime for that time? or
It is
what?
an overtime rate, correct,
But that's charged off to the customer.
to the company, whoever asks for the service.
like DCU at the mall had a detail every day when they were shut down during COVID to get the traffic moving through. And they paid an overtime rate for a police officer to be there to help them with that.
They still do, actually, because they've had some unruly guests there.
Right. So,
Okay.
That's because they're waiting 2 hours to get to the teller.
They haven't figured out how to make an appointment yet.
I know, my dad figured it out, that's what he does.
So the amount that we charge includes retirement and things like that go
correct.
along with that?
Workers' comp retirement, that's a fully loaded cost that we charge off, and that rate is, of course,
6770?
7631.
Yeah, come on, read the numbers.
7631, so that's what we'll be charging. We also have an internal detail rate that we charge that's a little bit less than that. It doesn't include some of the additional costs for like administrative fees and things of that sort. And an internal detail would be Continental Paving is paving for the town. I'm not gonna pay Continental pay 7631, and then they're gonna charge me 10% over that. They're
10%
gonna
over
charge me
that.
$85 for a detail. I give them my rate and say, do the details at the town rate.
Because you're doing
With
our
no
job.
up, with no upcharge. However, if Continental's paving for another whatever,
For some
and they
other-
need
for-
one,
for
they
the
get
outlets
charged
or
to
something, yeah.
7631.
Okay. So I have a question that has nothing to do with the budget, but there's a place up by the outlet mall where there's a bank and some restaurants, and there are a couple of Merrimack police barricades in that private parking lot, which have been there for quite some time. What's going on there?
That's because of the issues they've had at the bank. We got called there during the height of this COVID situation when they were closing down banks. That facility there is the only drive-up teller in New Hampshire. So therefore, everyone was flocking here because the inside of the bank's interiors were closed. So in order to mitigate the traffic issues there, we provided with the barricades to make sure people go all the way around rather than, what we're having is the issue, people are backing up onto the Premium Outlet Boulevard, even onto Industrial. So we thought it was worthwhile to leave our barricades up there to make sure we enforce the correct traffic pattern. They provided their own cones, and like I said, they are hiring us as part of the service. That's we've been allowing them to use the barricades.
So we're working in that parking lot?
Yeah, they hire us on a daily basis for certain hours, still because they still have angry patrons that come in that can't get an appointment, and they feel safer with us there.
Okay.
I was gonna say, Mr. Chairman, my wife and I, we bank with DCU, so I've had the unfortunate occasion of hanging out for 2.5 hours in that queue. Thankfully, Captain Charlton was actually there one day, and he was kind enough to say hi, which was nice, but no, it's
That's the deputy chief.
Deputy Chief. I'm sorry, still, Deputy, I apologize.
And congratulations and welcome. This is your first meeting
Yeah, this is your
as
first
well,
budget meeting
so-
too, so welcome as well. Anyway, So long and the short of it is that I've seen them use those barricades to basically manage the traffic up there. So.
And early on in the COVID, I saw the traffic there, and it seemed kind of bizarre. But
And it's
But
funny.
at this point, I was just surprised to see those barriers still there, thinking that that's private property. They ought to be providing their own barriers.
Correct, yeah, but they still contract out with us, and it's easier for our officers to keep them in place and make sure people go the right way, because you get people going the wrong way, on the wrong side, they see traffic's backed up, and traffic will still back up, not as bad as before, however, it's more of a safety issue for us.
Okay, they're up 24/7, right? I mean,
Yeah, they're up there 24/7, they're anchored, so they don't blow away. It's just it's a safer option. They provide all their own cones and such, and other signboards to navigate motorists around.
okay, that was just more my question. I haven't been queried by anybody, but I was just expecting that to happen eventually. Is why is Merrimack providing barriers for private industry? But
It's because they're still paying for our
because
service.
they're also paying for your services there. Okay. Any other questions on police or police details, communications? Are we doing any radio changeovers or maintenance updates or something this year? I didn't notice them as I glanced through the
Nothing this
budget.
current year. There's something that we're working on to look at a coverage study with the assistant town manager that will probably be presented to them shortly.
Okay. I'm not anxious to do that.
I figured as much because I remember presenting the last one to you.
Pardon? What, the
3-4
radio
years ago.
upgrade?
3-4 years ago.
It seems like not long ago, but it seems like we keep running into it very frequently. But anyway,
I think what we're seeing too is there's a lot of growth in town, and that might be having an effect on some of the radio coverage.
okay. If there's no other questions for police, then I think we're done there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Appreciate your sticking around. We could have called you in, so you didn't have to sit here all the time. We don't have our padded benches anymore.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Have a nice weekend.
Here, they took the pads off. These people cough on
There's other stuff people do with them too.
Good night.
Yes, Paul?
Sorry, Deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just had to bust your chops on that.
You do a good job.
There was a question asked at last meeting about the elections and why the elections were in 1920 were so much more. That was part of the money was because of the COVID-related plexiglass that we bought specific for the elections and things of that sort. So at the time, I was waiting to get reimbursed, so it was charged off to the election 8410. We have got reimbursed for that. That was about $10,000 worth of plexiglass that we bought for the elections that happened in June 23rd. So that was a lot of the cost was COVID-related costs that we got reimbursed in July for.
Okay, great. What was I looking for this? So, we have a regular council meeting tomorrow night. And then Wednesday of next week is our third and hopefully almost final budget hearing dealing with solid waste, highway, equipment maintenance, buildings and grounds, public works administration, wastewater fund, and proposed issuance of debt.
We'll explain it more for you next week when Kyle comes in, but there is going to be a warrant article for proposed issuance of debt. There's a study, proposed issuance of debt. There's a study that we're looking to do, and it's 100% reimbursable through the state revolving fund. However, we cannot just put it in our budget and bring in the income to our budget. They said that we have to do it like a bond, and it's a $75,000 study, and we have to do it, the warrant article like a bond, and it's a zero cost to the taxpayers because it's fully reimbursed by the state revolving fund. But they,
But we need a 66% approval rate or something, or?
Something, see, I'm still trying to figure that out, and I'll have more information for you next week
Okay,
because of the way, because it's state revolving fund, and that's the way they want these to be done. There's communities that have $1,000 grants, and they want them to put it out as a bond. So that's, that's proposed issuance, that's where we'll be talking about.
all right. Okay, hopefully we won't use any of our snow dates, and then January 21, we'll be here again to talk about fire department. We didn't talk about their additional personnel
Right.
needs.
There is one other, we do have one other snow date built in. I believe it's the
27th?
27th. And it's 100% up to the purview of the council, whether they want to handle the cuts and things at the at the town council meeting on the 28th, or whether they want to have the special meeting on the 27th to handle their budget with any cuts or adds that the council might want to do. So it's totally up to the council, but we do have that extra day built in now. Knock on wood, we don't get a snow day next week. So, but it's up to the council whether they want to have the, during the regular council meeting, or if they want to just hold the special budget meeting to do their final deliberations on the budget before the public hearing.
No, we do, I believe we have scheduled for the 28th at 6:30
What?
prior to the town council. Yes. Right?
No,
No.
not normally.
No, it would not be. It would be during the town, it would be an agenda item in the town council meeting.
No, but what I'm saying is I think we have it already scheduled for 6:30 on the 28th.
No, that's on the
27th.
21st.
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 Next week, we're scheduled to talk
Oh,
about fire
okay.
department on the 21st.
Correct, I
Theoretically,
knew
we could
that.
talk about budget changes at that point as well, but
Theoretically, if you would like to afterwards, you could,
we could add that to that.
we could add that to the
Day. Oh, I
21st
guess
meeady,
I-
or we can do it separately on the
For whatever
27th.
reason I had, okay. Maybe I had a premonition. Okay.
Okay, that works for me.
Because I really had 6:30 down.
So, we don't have to decide it tonight. I just want to throw it out there as something for everybody
There's
to
other
think
things we could
about.
meet about if you'd like, so.
But yeah, if we
Whatever
are,
the pleasure of the council.
but if we are going to change it up and start the deliberations on the 21st, we just need to post it when we do the 21st agenda,
Right.
which would be by Tuesday, 72 hours in advance. Tuesday, Monday?
Okay,
Yes,
we'll let you know.
thank you.
I'm not inclined to do that at this point, but I haven't gotten any feedback either, so. If there's no other actions anybody wants to take or comments anybody wants to make, we could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Bill, seconded by Barbara. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? That passes 7-0-0. Thank you very much.